Okay, Baltimore City Council Ways and Means Committee. We're back for Mayor and City Council of Baltimore Resolution 24-0523, operating budget for the Baltimore City Board of School Commissioners for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2025. I'm Mayor Costello, Councilman from the 11th District, Chair of the committee, joined to my right by Council Vice President Sharon Green Middleton, 6th District member of the committee, Councilman James Torrance, 7th District, Councilman Zeke Cohen, 1st District. To my left, Councilwoman Odette Ramos, 14th District. To my immediate right is Marguerite Curran, staff to the committee. We're joined by representatives of the Mayor's Office and the Council President's Office. We're here for Baltimore City Public School System. We are going to start with the Chair of the committee. Mr. Chair, if you could please, I'm sorry to disturb you. I didn't realize you were speaking. Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, if you could please turn on your microphone. It's the button on the bottom right. And please first and last name for the record and then do your presentation.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Ronald McFadden, the chair of the Baltimore City Board of School Commissioners, and I appreciate the opportunity to come this evening to queue up our presentation around our FY2025 budget. So thank you, Chairman Costello, and members of the Ways and Means Committee and other distinguished City Council members who are present this evening. I'm Ronald McFadden, the chair of the Baltimore City School Board, and I also want to recognize Commissioner Lawson, who is here this evening, who's also a member of the City School Board. The CEO will go into more detail, but tonight's budget will reflect steps toward the board's mission of providing quality education that focuses on each child and equipping all students with the life skills and academic foundation needed to contribute to our changing society. The council will see in our presentation that we are providing the vast majority of our general funds directly to schools, about 87%. While other school districts around the state and the country are making cuts, we are holding steady as we continue to address the whole child in this budget, and the board is proud of this. I want to point out that we have allocated funding to address mental health, restorative practices, and more creative outlets, well-rounded outlets for our students. We are focusing on the math curriculum, personalized tutoring, and literacy coaches, just to name a few. This budget will also allow the school system to continue to address the learning challenges many of our students face while learning virtually. We will continue to provide and scale up tutoring services, summer learning opportunities, as the board just met actually about an hour ago in a committee regarding summer learning activities and opportunities for our students, and other academic interventions for our students. The budget before you clearly outlines priorities based on available funding. But as you all know, even with the additional dollars from the blueprint for Maryland's future and the additional city dollars over the next 10 years, it's not everything that we know our children deserve and that they need. Thank you again for allowing us to have some comments tonight, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Santelises to introduce her staff and to go further in tonight's presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dr. Santelises, you can either go up there or you can sit there, whatever's more convenient. First and last name for the record, and if you could introduce first and last name and position title of all of your senior staff that'll be testifying tonight, please and thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Chair Costello, and thank you, Board Chair McFadden, for the framing for this evening. Good evening, fellow, or I should say, other council members as well. It's good to see you this evening, and we appreciate the opportunity to be here. Before I begin, I would like to recognize members of my team who are here for additional support. With us this evening, we have Chris Doherty, who is our Chief Financial Officer. We have Allison Perkins Cohen, our Chief of Staff. We have Dr. Joan Dabrowski, Chief Academic Officer. We have Stacy Place-Tose, who is our Chief of Schools. We have Emily Nielsen, who is our Chief Human Capital Officer. We have Dr. Lynette Washington, our Chief Operating Officer. And we also have available for comment and further questions if necessary, Major Norman Coleman, who is our interim school police chief, Sonia Goodwin, Executive Director for Whole Child Services and Supports, Kim Hoffman, Executive Director for Data Monitoring and Compliance. And also from our finance team, we have Courtney Desabé and Sandy Jacobs. We are also joined tonight by Melissa Broom and Dewana Starrett, representing our legislative team. Oh, and Chief Tommy Jones, our Chief IT Officer as well. So thank you. I will begin this evening from my seat, if that is all right. And I will get started by just reiterating what we heard from Chair McFadden, and that is we are proud to present a budget that really does safeguard the strong foundation that we've built, and in light of so many other districts across the country and frankly in the state of Maryland who have made cuts. We have, with the ending of ESSER, because of planning, hard work of principals at school sites, what you will see is that city schools budget actually sustains many of the major investments that we have had in the previous school year. What you'll see is that our budget is still grounded in 4 major principles. One, it's grounded in equity for all students. It's guided by the district's new Portrait of a Graduate, and it's based on our district's accomplishments, so building on some of where we have seen growth and progress, and as always, a reflection of the feedback that we have received from the community. I think it's important, just for a quick note, to note that equity within city schools, I just wanted to draw the council's attention to our equity policy. And this really does help to provide guiding questions for how we engage with our budget process. So some of our key equity questions that ground all of our work, you will see in operation here this evening. Briefly, for this council, Portrait of a Graduate, and we did have some representation from the council a number of weeks ago when we introduced our Portrait of a Graduate, which really is a strategic position for us that we spent a good amount of time developing with the community. So we had family and student input to this Portrait of a Graduate. And in the kind of simple language, what you see here in the 3 areas of academics, wholeness, and leadership is the building out of the blueprint for success that city schools launched nearly 7 years ago. But building out with the attempt to really answer the question, what do we want to see in graduates from Baltimore City schools? And some of the key principles are listed here. As I noted, just briefly, that the Portrait of a Graduate does build on the 3 key areas of blueprint for success, but as I noted, this really is about moving forward, building out, taking feedback from schools as well as community. And I think it's also important for the council to see, when we say community feedback, the kinds of meetings and engagement. And you can do next slide, Melissa. Thank you. You'll see here the kind of community engagement that we launched during this time to make sure that this Portrait of a Graduate really did reflect both the thoughts, the input, as well as the language of our key stakeholders. And you will see at the bottom of this slide the priorities that were reinforced through these engagement opportunities. So as we had these conversations across our city, these are the major themes that we saw continuing to be verified and reinforced. And so with that, I am now going to turn it to our Chief Financial Officer very quickly to go through this year's funding considerations.
Thank you, Dr. Santelises. Again, for the record, Chris Doherty from the Finance Office. I'm happy to provide some top lines before we get into more of the specifics and the actual activities that our FY25 budget are supporting. First, kind of the required pie chart that shows our overall funding from all sources. That is to say, our general fund, our special fund in orange, sometimes also referred to as restricted funds, and then in the gray you see the enterprise fund. Starting with the smallest, the enterprise fund is the fund that we use to provide food and nutrition services to our children. As the council knows, we are a community eligibility provision district. We're very proud of that. We feed our students free breakfast, lunch, snack, and supper, irrespective of the level of family income. And we are on track for about 13+ million meals that we supply. And that sliver, that gray sliver, is the enterprise fund, which is essentially, not always, not every year exactly, but essentially funded through the revenues provided by the U.S. Department of Agriculture for those 13 million or so meals. The next biggest is the restricted or the special funds, and that's your Title I, Title II, Title IV, and as the name suggests, they are dollars that come with various specific restrictions tagged to those monies. And the biggest portion of the pie is the general fund at 1.436, and it is that portion, the relatively more flexible portion, with which you can do a range of general education activities, that the city's nearly $390 million goes into the blue. As mentioned, on a side-by-side comparison, you see our main revenue sources, unlike the city as a whole, that has a variety of different revenue sources, each having its own kind of ins and outs. 98+% of our funding comes from the state of Maryland and the city of Baltimore. So 70%, a little bit more, comes from the state of Maryland, and 28% comes from the city of Baltimore. All other sources added up, as intensely appreciated as they are in the 1.5% to 2% range, bringing us up in a general fund to the 1.405 last year to 1.437 billion this year. And also, again, keeping at the high levels, but it's important to point out that at the macroeconomic level, when we think of the FY25 budget, there are two main factors at the highest level. One is it's the first year for us or for any district post-COVID funding. As we know, we got historic levels, like other districts across the country, of COVID-related ESSER funding, and FY25 is the first year, which is sometimes informally called post the ESSER cliff. That's a major defining characteristic of FY25. The other big defining characteristic is that it's year 3 of the blueprint for Maryland's future plan, and it's actually the leanest year, which is not intuitive. It's the 10-year plan of the blueprint is not a stepwise increase like a stair step. It's subject to the specific formulas that drive the funding, and FY25, the third year, is projected to be the leanest of all 10. And I point that out because the net effect of those two things equals a year-over-year increase overall in about the 2.8% range. So it's a lean year, but it's a year, as Dr. Sanalisa said, and the examples will bear out more, where unlike other districts across the state rather, and the country, we're not in a position of scaling back people or programs, which we're very pleased to be in that position of strength. Next slide, please. As all committee members know, the single biggest factor with funding comes from the size of the district, the number of children, as of course that makes sense. At the same time, our funding formulas can sometimes be a bit complicated. And the key thing to know about these numbers is that on the one hand, you can say our funding is about flat, right? Our the 2.8% funding increase is a function of student enrollment. But it's important to point out that if you take, for FY25, we use the children, the count of children that were in their seats on 9/30/23. And so if you look at the eligible children in our district on 9/30/23, it's actually more than its analogous number in 9/30/22. And that's important to point out because that hasn't happened for quite some time. And so we actually have more eligibly enrolled children at the beginning of the school year 23-24 than the year before it. And that's a positive factor, even if the overall numbers look kind of flat. And on the, it's a bit wonky, but there's an asterisk in your package. The funded enrollment, you see, goes from 71,510 in 24 to the 70,925. And that doesn't have our pre-K kids. So I think the most meaningful number is when you add our pre-K children, and that's what gets you to what's sometimes shorthanded as approximately 75,000, or more accurately, approximately 76,000. But then through the vagaries of the funding formula, those numbers can sometimes change, having to do, for example, with things like immunization or absences around the 930 count. But the important thing is that there were actually more eligible children in seats in the fall of 23 than the fall of 22, which we take as a really positive sign. The next slide, I'm not going to walk through all of these, but the reason for this slide, and it's in your package, is these are the categories. When the Blueprint for Maryland's Future, sometimes shorthanded as Kerwin, when they talk about categorical funding, here are the categories, and those are they, and the formulas do not all go up at the same time. They're actually quite a mixture. The important thing to see there is the foundation funding. That's about 40% of the total, right? These are in order from highest to lowest. Compensatory ed, funding that makes up for children living in areas of high poverty, is fully another 30% on top of that. And if you put in the concentrations of poverty money, the next one, that gets you to 39%. So essentially almost another 40%. And all the other categories, come up after that. And in this slide, you see from what's often called blueprint funding, the previous one, a smallish year-over-year increase from the just under 1.5 billion to the 1.542 billion, which again is in it's 2.8%. That's why you'll sometimes hear us call it a fairly lean year. The next slide is one that's been alluded to in, I think, Chair McFadden's introduction, as well as Dr. Sanalisis's, because staff keep a very close eye on this. This is the pie chart that takes a look at our funding and says, where is it going? We have a very decentralized system in Baltimore. We're very proud of that. And the money, even before the Blueprint for Maryland's Future kind of codified it in certain ways, the money goes to the schools. We were a fair student funding district long before the Blueprint came along, because that's where the children are. A 500-child school can look quite different depending on who's there, and whether there's a high percentage of multilingual learners or a high percentage of children receiving special education. So it's not kind of a cookie cutter, a school with 500 students gets X amount. It's very dependent on the children who are there. So fully 87% of those funds that we touched on earlier go either directly to the schools to be controlled by the principals, or are spent centrally on behalf of the schools. Utilities and things like that. Things that make transportation, utilities, things that make more sense to centrally pay for and organize, but that undeniably benefit the schools. And we're quite, that's been at the 87%, 88% mark for a number of years, because it's something we carefully keep track of. Another slice that I'll draw your attention to is the central office. It shows in blue. The central office is we call it out on purpose to say, okay, how much of the funds that we're entrusted with go to the folks that are trying to, as best we can, help run the district, and it's at the modest 6% amount. And that's specifically a function of trying to push out as much money as we can to the schools and to the kids, and keeping track onto whether that number creeps up over time or stays where it is. And this 6% figure compares very favorably to other large districts in the nation. The next slide is yet another pie chart. I think it's our last pie chart. And this is an exploded pie chart of the things that I mentioned were paid for on behalf of the school, but budgeted centrally. So I mentioned offhandedly transportation and utilities. That together is, I guess, 36%. But school police is in there at 4%, school supports, non-public placements. It's just a range of things that are not just historically, but that make more sense and are better done at a central office and then applied to the benefit of the schools, rather than having 160 different school-based utilities offices and 160 school-based transportation offices. I think that kind of on its face, that would be cost more and be redundant. And frankly, the schools, I don't think have any particular appetite to do it in the first place. So I don't think on any of this it's taking something from the schools that they, given their druthers, would like to do. So that's a once over lightly for the top lines. And I think the next slide, we'll talk a bit more on when we talk about transitioning away from ESSER.
Great. Thank you, Chris. I'm Allison Perkins-Cohen, Chief of Staff for City Schools. And so as Chris and Dr. Santelises and the board chair talked about, this is a transition year where we're ramping down on ESSER. And we were able to do that fairly without some of the pain that you saw in other counties or across the country, by really being strategic in the way we invested that money in the first place and thinking about things that might have to go away. And then also kudos to the teams in the cabinet for really looking at the investments they made and assessing which ones made sense. And I'll particularly call out the CAO, Joan Dabrowski, and her team, and give an example of tutoring, where we did a lot of tutoring. Tutoring was really necessary after the pandemic to help students catch up. And so that was a really critical investment that made a big difference. And Joan and her team did an excellent job of using empirical data to really track the outcomes of that data, so that when we had to make hard decisions, when we had to reduce tutoring, we had really could really delineate those programs and subject areas by grade, which ones were effective in which areas, so that we could keep the ones that were working well and remove the ones that were not as effective in certain grades. So thanks to the team for that kind of work. I also, just as we wind down ESSER, I want to call out Kim Hoffman, who's sitting behind me, who oversees our COVID grants. And again, I think that we're unusual in the state and unusual across the country in terms of the way that we've been able to effectively use our COVID grants. So of the 29 COVID grants we received, we've already closed out 23 of those and spent 99.7% of those funds. And we are on track. We'll spend all of the funds across all of our grants, and very effectively at programming that makes a real difference for young people, and we'll talk about some of those investments coming up. So I will turn over to our CAO, Joan Dabrowski.
Yes, thank you so much. Good evening. So I'm going to highlight just a few of the items here. On this first slide, I want to just, again, lift up the investment we continue to make in high-quality instructional materials. Of particular focus this year is math and our pre-K curriculum and materials that we're investing in for fiscal 25. As Chief Perkins-Cohen just highlighted, our work around high-dosage tutoring, being very strategic on where we can continue and lift that support up in 130 of our schools. And then, again, our investments for coaching and educators. Of particular importance is our math and our literacy coaching work, and the investments we're making in our pre-K special education programs, where we're seeing some very promising practices in the area of inclusion and some of our kindergarten readiness work. If we go to the next slide, here we're just going to talk about some of the ways we are thinking about a full, well-rounded education, and we think about the investments we're making in science to ensure our students have access to high-quality lab materials and resources. You can see that there. I want to highlight again this meeting the needs of all of our learners and just lift up the investments we are making in our Judy centers. Again, something we're very proud of in the 14 sites that we have across the city, and the work that does to provide full wraparound services for our youngest learners. And again, lifting up for all learners, our huge increased numbers of multilingual learners require us to make sure we've got strategic investments to support English language development, and then our ongoing investments for extended learning time. On the next slide here, as we think about our secondary success and innovation, really just want to call out our continued work to ensure that our young people are on track to graduate, and knowing that 9th grade is a pivotal year. So you can see the investments there we're making to support school-based decisions, as well as the ongoing work in high school counselors and credit recovery. I also want to just lift up the strategic work in our college and career readiness, our CTE strategic plan that continues to support the work of our pathways, expanded in several of our high schools, and then looking at the school-based positions to support that, and the post-secondary success. So again, just a lot of positions and investments to ensure that our young people are ready for college and career.
Good evening, Stacey Jose, Chief of Schools. So for school year 23-24, the Re-Engagement Center serves over 1,400 students. And our Re-Engagement Center provides comprehensive support to students in 3 key areas: student outreach, progress monitoring, and even school opportunities. Additionally, the Re-Engagement Center supports transitions and mentoring for students from the Department of Juvenile Services. For student outreach, we focus on identifying and supporting students entering our school system from alternative placements, as well as those at risk of academic disengagement. For progress monitoring, this includes tracking attendance, providing behavioral supports if needed, conducting home visits, offering in-person mentoring, and facilitating career building and post-secondary opportunities. And lastly, for evening school, this provides additional support and flexible learning opportunities for students who need additional help or need assistance with scheduling because they have conflicts that prevent them from attending school during the traditional day. For athletics, this has been our largest current expansion in middle school athletics, which has been highly successful and has received increased support for both schools and the district. From last year, 22-23, to this year, we've been able to see increased participation in all sports, including cross-country, unified flag football, volleyball, unified indoor bocce, and basketball. We also have 1 student who plays golf and a field hockey team. So we are very proud that we are able to offer these for our students. Our funding highlighted on this slide supports the holistic and physical needs of our students. This includes direct assistance for students transferred outside of the usual school transfer window. We have 3 positions for next school year: the transition ambassador, and this is to streamline support and the experience for students, schools, and families. We're looking to expand staffing with our school police. So the 107 staff include police officers, civilians such as dispatchers, and guards, administrative support as well. And we're also looking to update our technological systems with school police, so modernizing our systems. We've had some wonderful district-wide family events this year. The last 2, we've had math nights at the B&O Museum and also at the Science Center, and some attendance incentives that we are looking. Our goal is to decrease chronically absent students to 36% by school year 26-27, and currently we are at 46.6%. So we are well on our way to meeting our goal. We have some incentives such as our 60-day attendance challenge that just concluded, and this was to mobilize schools to dig deeper into their data and look at students who are at risk for chronic absenteeism and providing additional supports that match their needs. All schools have a full-time social worker and a school psychologist. The academics and the school office have collaborated to have a centralized team that supports schools in crisis. This includes related service providers and members of our wholeness team. Restorative practices, this is at the heart. Relationships are at the heart of restorative practices, and it's also a key strategy we are using to create stronger communities, cultivate relationships, and address accountability in a way that honors and heals harm. We have professional learning for leaders, teachers, hall monitors, and coaches. We've had 113 schools that received training and support and restorative approaches this year, and we also have 5 staff members that are at central office who are trained to support schools. For our expanded behavioral health, City Schools has addressed the issue of unstaffed health suites by issuing an RFP for partnerships with local universities, their nursing schools. This initiative provides career and technical education opportunities, or CTE, mentoring and healthcare internships for students, creating a pipeline of future nurses by exposing them to school health as a career option. By having a registered nurse in every school, we significantly improve health suite services, particularly for students with complex medical needs. We have partnerships with Johns Hopkins, Morgan State University, and Coppin State University, and they all bring valuable resources to enhance our school health suite model. And as Chief Doherty mentioned before, our meals we provide for students is breakfast, lunch, snack, and supper.
So I'm just going to lift up a couple of the professional learning investments that we're making as part of fiscal 25. So we continue to offer a range of opportunities for our new novice and veteran staff throughout the school year. But I want to lift up the work we are doing this summer. We're doing a lot of investment to host multi-day learning opportunities for our educators. We have 38 different courses that teachers can take this summer, close to 2,000 seats available across 3 different weeks in late June and early August to, again, support the important pieces around science of reading, our math content, our new pre-K curriculum. So we're very excited about that investment. We also are investing in our IEP chairs, as we know that they hold a pivotal role in supporting our students with disability. And so their arc of learning, how they learn throughout the school year, is a key part of our investment here, as well as, again, just intentional efforts to support the large number of early career educators that we have in city schools.
Great, and in the leadership category, we also want to highlight all the work that we've done on really amplifying youth voice. And Chief High Hubbard could not be here tonight. Her son is progressing from 8th grade to Baltimore Polytechnic, so she's celebrating with her family. But happy to report on some of the work, the tremendous work that she and her team, Haley Tilt, have done with our ASCBC, really growing the opportunities for our young people to have voice and to be part of a student Congress. So there's been 3 meetings of our General Assembly of our Student Congress this year, with about 250 students at each, up from about 150 the year prior. I think some of you have had the opportunity to speak to our Student Congress and kind of know the importance of these students. Many of our recent graduates are on some of your staff, Councilwoman Ramos, Councilman Conway. We have a former student who's in the Mayor's Office of Legislative Affairs. So, and then we have our student commissioner here, who's just an exemplar of the kind of students that have an interest in government and want exposure to it. And so we're really proud to have those opportunities for our young people. Then the next slide was about also pipeline development. So Chief Nielsen is in the front row, and she's done really great work in terms of creating a para to teacher pipeline. So this year, over 100 of our hires were substitutes or paras that became teachers. We're really intently working on making sure that those pathways are there for our para educators who are also, when I talked about our tutoring earlier, it was our para tutoring program that was one of our most effective tutoring programs. So we know these para educators are really good with our students, and so we're actively looking for pathways to get them into teaching. And then last, I will just talk about teacher salaries. So we used ESSER dollars for stipends early on, again, looking for ways to use resources that stipend, we don't have to worry about keeping it going, so we could use that for ESSER dollars. But then with some of the blueprint dollars, we've done 6.5% overall increase for teachers, but particularly also focused on increasing the starting for their competitive wage for early teachers, because we were not competitive across the board, but particularly for starting teachers. So we were much more competitive now and able to hire teachers competitively with other jurisdictions. And with that, I will turn it over to our Chief Operating Officer, Dr. Lynette Washington.
Good evening. So I'm just going to briefly talk through facility investments. There have been a large number of investments over the last 2 years because of ESSER. So we have invested in almost 127 projects, are completed or are in process because of ESSER, and we just want to highlight our bathroom projects. We are doing bathroom renovations with ESSER dollars in buildings that are not new buildings, not newly renovated buildings. And so we still have a portfolio of buildings that are not touched by the 21st Century Program or the Build to Learn program. And so that is where we're investing in for bathroom renovation. So we have about 22 restrooms that were completed with about $31 million, and we will in total have touched about 51 buildings. We also, in the budget, still talk about our capital investment that goes before the City Planning Commission. So $27 million is coming from the state with another $19 million that's coming from the city. And then lastly, in the budget, you'll see that there's a $20 million contribution towards the 21st Century Building Plan, and that's to close some of the gap because the schools weren't fully funded by the Build to Learn program.
And I just want to thank again Chair McFadden and the team for the overview of this year's proposed or presenting city schools budget. And I will turn it back over to you, Chair Costello, for questions. Oh, I'm sorry, and are you going to acknowledge?
Yes, before that, Commissioner Muhammad is with us this evening too, so I certainly want to acknowledge his presence here this evening.
Chairman McFadden, CEO Santelises, thank you for the presentation and for being here with us tonight. Couple quick housekeeping items, colleagues. First, I think as everyone is aware, and this is more for the benefit of the public, the City of Baltimore has a requirement to fund city schools at a certain level. So this hearing tonight is a little bit different than the marathon of hearings that we've been going through for the last week and a half and have 2 more days of. So we are not in a position to make cuts to this budget. We are not in a position to move things in this budget from different service areas, from one area to another. We are required by law to fund the amount that has been presented to us this evening. Even if we were to not vote in favor of this budget, the City of Baltimore, represented by the mayor and city council, would still be required to fund city schools in the amount that has been presented before us this evening. I know that all of our colleagues are aware of that, but I just want to say that for the benefit of the public that are viewing this hearing tonight, and I know this hearing is quite the hot ticket on pay-per-view this evening. So that's the first thing. The second thing is we're going to do something a little different this evening in terms of questions. I'm going to ask Marguerite to keep a timer on questions. Questions are going to be limited to 1 minute. That device right there will beep, and you will have to finish your question in 1 minute and then give folks from city schools an opportunity to answer your question. We will be limiting it to 1 question per colleague, and we will cycle through and we will move through this hearing as efficiently as humanly possible. Colleagues, any questions about the format before we begin? All right, seeing that there are none, we'll start off with Council Vice President Middleton.
Real quick, before I get into my 1 question, I was sitting here smiling the whole time through the presentation, and just to see what is about to happen and is continuing to happen with the Baltimore City school system is just so fantastic. The 6.5% increase for teacher salary, the community engagement piece. I could go down the list, but I won't, and I just want to, you don't hear thank you enough, so I do want to say thank you for all of you for all that you do, and just keep in mind that we are here for the children. We have our own ways of how we think about helping the children, but we are here for the children, and that should be the pleasant part that we do. So into my first question, So we did have Department of Transportation here, and they gave us some good news that they are hiring, I think it's 7 or 8 crossing guards, which is a very good, that's another good plus that's going to help the safety of our children on our streets. And I guess I want to know, do you have a partnership with transportation with that crossing guard piece, and how you can maybe enhance what they have proposed to, include in their budget?
I'm just gonna, I'm nodding, Madam Vice Chair, to Dr. Washington, who's our Chief Operating Officer.
So yes, we do have a partnership. And so one of the things we've been doing is we've been meeting biweekly with the Department of Transportation and highlighting some of that. So if there are schools that, need additional crossing guards because they have traffic issues, or just because constituents are reaching out or the school administration is reaching out, we're flagging those schools. So yes, we definitely appreciate that they're bringing on additional crossing guards to support schools. And so we flag schools that are on the radar because they need additional crossing guards. And we have that during our biweekly meeting.
Awesome. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Ramos?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sort of on the lines of Madam Vice President, we have a couple of schools that were recently redone through the 21st century. We have 3. And 2 of them, well, one of them, we have a real problem with drop off and pickup. And it was because MSA did not engage DOT. As a matter of fact, said, we're not going to engage DOT. And so we have a mess. So I'm kind of wondering what's going to move forward now with the new schools that are going to be redone, one of which is in my district, in terms of that partnership with DOT, because we can't have what's happening out front of Montebello happening anywhere else. And I do hope that we can find a solution to what's happening at Montebello, because there's going to be a kid hit. And this is not a crossing guard issue. This is a double parking, really dangerous situation issue. Which was not well planned during the restructuring of Montebello School. So with the schools, the next set of schools, how are we addressing that?
And so I can answer that one too. I think that there are 2 pieces. The first one is that there is a budget that MSA has to adhere to. And so I will say that for the high schools that are coming up, it is us continually advocating and pushing for continual support around those traffic issues, right? And so for Montebello, again, we're still having ongoing conversations with the Department of Transportation of what are some of the tools that we can use, and also with the school principal too. So what are some of the tools that we can use given that the budget or the resources didn't support additional surfacing and some of the additional things that might have happened on the site. For the high school plan, it's the similar thing. We're using other funding to try to plug in some of the holes so that we can be able to address that pickup and drop off piece. But we are having conversations.
Can I just add to that, Councilwoman Ramos? And Dr. Washington is right, and the challenge is that the resources for the high school plan is not enough. So we already, Dr. Washington and her team and Chief Doherty, we've been putting funds aside, and the board have been putting funds aside to try to help close the gap. But the funding that we have that is already not enough is just for the buildings. And so that's why we really have to, it would welcome partnership of council folks too, as we're looking at how do we work with community partners, alumni associations, and the council to help fill some of the gaps, because the surrounding area on some of these schools does need a lot of work, and the money we have, which we're still closing the gap on, is about the buildings.
Well, in my particular case, in my district, we are working on it. I'm right there with Principal Harcum and understand what we have to do, and I've been advocating. But I'm just, like, we could have turned the Montebello School around a little bit to be able to have the parents drop off behind when we opened up, Lake Montebello, that little sliver for cars. Like, it's not planned well. And that's not that's a planning issue, not a budget issue, right? And so I just want to make sure that I'm clear what's going to happen in my district, but with the other schools, making sure that DOT is part of the planning around that is going to be really, really important. So I just want to make sure that that's happening. Thank you.
Thank you. Cohen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Dr. Santelises, to your whole team. Want to just shout out and lift up once again Director Goodwin, who I think is doing extraordinary work in the Office of Wholeness, as well as my friend, partner in the work, Commissioner Mohammed. Love the leadership and work that he has shown in expanding how we're thinking about whole child. Appreciate that. I want to take just a brief moment to express some pretty profound concern that you still do not have a contract. I will say, as someone who has at times been critical of your administration, you are someone who has come to the city and dedicated 7 years of your life to our children, who has been nothing but a public servant, who has shown more continuity in your leadership than any previous CEO since I've been around in Baltimore. And I think we saw what happened when we had a CEO whose contract expired and there was not enough time for a thoughtful transition.
Councilman, hang on 1 second. Colleagues, are we all right yielding 1 more minute to the councilman to finish his statement? Any objections? Very good.
Appreciate that. We saw what happened when there's a lack of continuity. I think it is extremely important that you get a contract, that it be a fair contract, and that we manage what will be a incredibly important moment in our city as we see the Esser Cliff, which you all spoke about, and then as we see the blueprint dollars start to come online. This is not the time for any sort of rapid transition. This is not the time to switch leadership. And I will just say, as someone who spent the last year knocking on doors all across the city of Baltimore, I think having a solid and stable CEO and the leadership that you have brought in this position is extremely important to me, and I believe to many of my colleagues. And I don't want to speak on behalf of the administration, but I'm quite sure that Mayor Scott feels the same. So I want to say that in starting off this hearing, I sincerely hope that contract negotiations are wrapped up in a timely manner and that you get the contract that you deserve so that we can all continue to do the work. That being said, I wanted to ask specifically about early childhood education, as it is one of the focus points of the blueprint. It is a priority for me. I know for many of us, we know the research and the data around 0 through 5 and the impact on cognitive development for kids' brains. I think that the blueprint is somewhat unspecific in prescribing how we get to universal pre-kindergarten, but I think as a city, we need to get there. And I've met with Chief Perkins Cohen and some of the folks in the early childhood work group, but I am really hoping that we, now that this money is gonna come from the state and from the city, that we can be really specific and really urgent around timelines about when we advance to universal pre-kindergarten for 4-year-olds and ideally for 3-year-olds. And so was hoping that you could share a little bit of your thoughts about how do we get to universal pre-K in the city of Baltimore, because our kids and our families deserve it.
Sure, and thank you, Councilman Cohen, and I will yield most of this response to Chief Dabrowski, but I will say this, that we are seeing the results of the investment in our youngest learners. And I know that we have been committed to pre-K prior to it being such a pillar of the state's work. I think the question is not about one convincing, and it's not about, as you heard with our new pre-K curriculum, we're doubling down, and our results, I think, have surprised some people across the state in that our young people are performing at or above the state level with regards to kindergarten readiness. The challenge is one of reconciling the cost of universal pre-K with what our allotment is currently. And, you know, within that, I think is the push and pull that we're going to have to reckon with and wrestle with. It's not for, I love universal pre-K. I think that mixed income play groups, having all zip codes in the city represented in our earliest classrooms is one of the best things we can do. The challenge is the road to get there. I don't know if Dr. Dabrowski, you wanted to add anything?
I think if there's the financial questions, I'll defer to my colleagues. The two things I'll add is our investments, because of the Kerwin legislations, have done two things for us that I think, in addition to us seeing these promising results of our early learning programs, our investment in our paraeducators who work in pre-K classrooms, and our determination that we don't lose those colleagues. So how we're helping them get that certification and proactively ensuring checking credentials, that's a wonderful outcome. The other is how we enroll. And so a centralized enrollment system, again, that allows families to have access, for us to keep better data, knowing where there's interest in seats and how we're trying to do that. Those have been two things that I think have been immediate places where we've seen this. But I think your question, though, around investments, I will toss to my finance colleagues, because I echo what Dr. Santalese says. It is not about not wanting to do it. There is such a willingness. Our early learning, I think you've met some of the colleagues in that early learning office, they are champions of young people. And we see when we make the investments with our young people, those youngest learners, those investments pay off. And we see that in our KRA data, which was phenomenal this year. So I'll look to my colleagues there about the finance part.
Well, what I'll say from the financial perspective is the blueprint doesn't, I think as we all know, the blueprint doesn't support universal pre-K. It supports universal pre-K for tier 1. And so sometimes that gets shorthanded to universal pre-K. But it's a pretty important distinction from the finance point of view. And it's also important to point out the pre-K program that we have is very robust and very large, unlike a lot of what happened across the state. So there's kind of a tension between the ramp up in pre-K as viewed by the blueprint and what we already had on the ground with more than 4,000, in the neighborhood of 4,000 kids. And so we have had pre-K deficits as the pre-K funding goes up. And so from 24 to 25, the pre-K category took a nice jump from 32 to 46 million. At the same time, there's no funding in there for tier 2 kids. It's only for tier 1 kids. So not to be, so in other words, we're grappling with that. We're grappling with the how we continue to support and build our pre-K program, even when it's not, it's only now just starting to be funded at a break-even rate. And in the past, we've, it's a bit strange to say like this, but we've had overages. We spend more on pre-K than we get. We spend more on special ed than we get, and we keep track of those. And as I say, the reason that I'm pointing out the difference is we're very pro-universal pre-K, and the blueprint is very clear. You're only going to get funds for tier 1 children. And so we're proud that we're offering it to all comers, and we think we'll continue to do so. But it's not it's a financial challenge. Like special ed, and there are overlap, there's a lot more special ed pre-K kids, and so there is overlap between the special ed overage and the pre-K overage, and that's just part of what we're doing. But I wouldn't want to leave without saying it's a financial challenge to make it continue to happen. But thankfully, the pre-K funding category is going up, but it's not going up as much as it costs. And finally, on this, it's pretty well known that educating the 3-year-olds is kind of uncharted waters, and it is even more expensive than educating 4-year-olds, if that doesn't sound too financial.
I think that's right, and I know that Councilman Cohen had asked before about the estimated cost of it, and I don't have it right in front of me, but we do have it, of expansion. It's in the, oh, we have the appendix, okay. Oh, she's got it pulled up, yeah, if you could pull it up from the appendix. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I would appreciate that. Let me just, for the public record, what is, I think, important to state is that Baltimore is beating the rest of the state when it comes to kindergarten readiness already. And so this is not a new thing for Baltimore City Schools. It's something we actually should be really proud of in Baltimore. And I think it is incredibly important that we get there and that you're right, the blueprint does not prescribe universal pre-K for all children in Maryland, but I think this is another opportunity for Baltimore to lead the state and get there first. And again, when I'm looking at DC and I'm looking at New York and I'm looking at some of these big cities, there is no reason why our kids shouldn't have that same opportunity. And so I would love, Melissa, if you have that number, I am very interested, it's up on the board, okay. I am very interested in what it's gonna cost and how we can get there. And I realize this is also about not enough pre-K teachers and the paraprofessionals and finding more space in buildings and all the complexity and nuances of it. No one should think in any way, shape, or form that it would be easy, even if the money was there. But I want to at least understand the money part of it so that we can start benchmarking out and figuring this out, because I think it is a worthy goal for the city of Baltimore and one that we should be striving toward.
Yeah. Mr. Chair, what's the latest in terms of the board's posture related to a new contract for the CEO?
So the board is, we have until the 30th of June.
And when does the current contract expire?
The 30th of June.
Do you know when the board anticipates?
The board is actively negotiating right now.
So you're negotiating with Ms. Santelises? Got it. So we will know something by the end of June?
Correct.
Okay. You timing me? Rules apply to me too. Thank you. Dr. Santelises, we are, I didn't do a question. I'm coming to you. Yeah, I didn't do a question. No, I got you next. It's still in the first round. I didn't do a question yet. I went to Middleton, Ramos, Cohen, yep. Anyway, I was saying, we are very blessed to have you in the city of Baltimore. While city schools may not be perfect and you may not be perfect, you have provided a very steady hand of leadership over an extended period of time, longer than most large city school districts in the entire nation. You are someone who is sought after nationally, and I hope that the board can find a way to come to terms with you so that you can continue your service to the city of Baltimore and to our young people. Thank you. Councilman Torrance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As a city schools parent, I see the progress our schools have made. As a former employee, I see it. Dr. Santelises, I do agree that we need to know where your contract stands. We've had our battles back and forth for city schools, but I know one thing, you do care about our children. We've had mixed reviews about your cabinet members and their roles in city schools. I still have a large number of concerns with special education. Just letting your staff know this is the order we're going in terms of my questions. We're gonna start with school police and their body-worn cameras. Then we're going to go into Douglas High School, as well as the contract for City College and extending its lease. In addition to that, we're going to come back to academics to discuss special education, then also the semester schedule in lieu of special education as well. This is all about accountability because I have a child in Baltimore City Public Schools. I benefit from the pre-K access, but I also recognize that I have teachers, psychologists, social workers who have grave concerns about the district in terms of leadership and execution, in terms of all the beautiful things you've thought about. And I say that because vision is important, but the execution is the most important part. And that is where I want to hold the district accountable. So my first question related to school police body cameras. I saw at Board Operations Committee on April 18th, I believe, that slide 21 was presented. Let me read from my email from Baltimore City Schools from Baltimore City Police Department. To their knowledge, and I'm gonna go by each bullet point so that it is aware that there were some things that were entirely inaccurate. One second. It is their understanding that City Schools Police does attend the Watch Center, but not daily, which was not accurately presented to the board. It is their understanding, which it was a request of mine, that they do attend the intel meetings, which they have successfully done.
Hang on. Colleagues, does anyone have a concern with giving Councilman Torrance an extra minute? Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and colleagues. We're not aware of the MTA task force that City Schools Police said they attend, but I did verify it through the Mayor's Office of Children and Family Success. In addition to that, there has been two trainings by Baltimore City Police Department for body-worn cameras. However, from discussing among some officers who reported, they have not had a pilot program yet. So my questions are, where are we in terms of the pilot, as well as the purchasing of the Axon cameras, and why are we behind when you have a mandate to have it done by July 1st of 2025?
Thank you, Councilman Torrance. I would ask Major Coleman if you would like to come forward and provide more current information.
Can you hear me? Good evening. Yes, the body-worn cameras, we have purchased body-worn cameras. Baltimore City Police Department wanted to donate some because they had purchased new ones. We have purchased new cameras, and we are working on a policy as far as capturing images within the building, so we have to make adjustments to the policy, and we're working with legal departments so that we can implement that policy this summer for the pilot program. That's where we are with the cameras.
However, presented at the board, you say you were currently in a pilot that ends in June and started in April. So that was inaccurately depicted on a current presentation to the board. My staff reviewed that presentation in lieu of preparing for this meeting. I have accountability because one of the things I do think about, and this is something I hold BPP accountable for, is our consent decree. Those cameras allow us to ensure that officers are interacting with our young people in the most appropriate way.
I understand that. However, my legal department said that there were some changes that they needed to make, so we have to go by the legal department.
However, it was presented at your own board operations committee that you currently have a pilot.
So, yes, we were going to pilot until something came up where they needed to make some changes.
I struggle because what was presented publicly stated that you currently have a pilot program. And my understanding, and this is why I asked, because my committee request was to get 30 seconds of any officer wearing a body-worn camera that is outside of school buildings so that there is no FERPA violation, to have proof that the actual pilot was happening, right? Because you have a mandate to do it. To give you an idea, it took us 2 years to bring on a body-worn camera pilot program for the city of Baltimore for our 3,000 officers, right?
Correct.
The software and cost alone exceeds your current actual budget as school police. So this is my request, Mr. Chair and Ms. Marguerite, and I'll have staff send. I would like to know the current status of the guidance document. I do know that if legal is producing it, I need it produced before the school year starts. I want to make sure that you all are implementing it before July 1st. I say that because I care about our children, but also care about our officers. And this is about training. I know this is not in her control because overview-wise, this is a small thing, but it's a thing that we put out publicly, and advocates have said they have not seen it. So this is one of those things that's a small hanging fruit. I recognize the training that your officers have received. I recognize that our police department has fulfilled their request to allow their officers to train your trainers because that's important. But I think we need, as a committee request, a timeline on the guidance document from their legal department, as well as the student privacy concerns when officers are wearing them. In addition to that, when will they purchase enough cameras for the entire force as you're trying to have up to 100 officers? My understanding from working with BPD, the current cost of an Axon is between $699 and $1,400 based off the technology needs. In addition to that, where will be the data warehousing for this actual footage? How will officers have to be trained daily on actually categorizing it, similar to the Baltimore City Police Department? And then in addition to that, will the state's attorney's office, as well as the legal department of city schools, actually have a unit that is reviewing such footage daily and weekly to ensure accountability with students' constitutional rights? In addition to that, ensuring that it is in compliance with FERPA. Thank you.
Councilman, thank you. Naya, please do not write any of that down because Councilman Torrance offered to email that comprehensive question, so I do appreciate that.
And Chair Costello, if I could just add one piece. I do think what will also be helpful is distinguishing between updates when implementation, which I know you know and many also know, that there is a plan, there's an intent, we proceed in that way, but part of what leading a large organization often surfaces is something like Major Coleman just described, which is we're in the process of getting ready to implement. As far as we knew, yes, the pilot is in place because what it means to have the pilot in place is we are getting ready to do something, we think we're able to do something, and our chief legal officer does his job because for exactly the reasons you were describing, we actually don't want to find ourselves in legal hot water. We actually do want to protect the rights of young people, which is very different than other institutions, including BPD. I mean, a lot of our work with young people, and part of why we still have a school police force, is because we know that operating with young people is different. So I just wanted to note that we can certainly provide updates, which might help in actually commuting the real-time implementation challenges between when something's communicated and when the actual implementation takes place. So, you know, we can provide those updates, and if you have a timeline for that, Councilman, in terms of updates for implementation, you can certainly provide that.
August 30th, but I just have concerns because what was articulated in public to the board, which is the responsible body for governance, in addition to what was stated publicly that BPD donated cameras after referring to BPD's evidence persons and supply people, there was never any donation. So I have questions even deeper, and this to take offline, where are the cameras? How many were purchased? And then who's wearing them too? Because those are just, that's the low-hanging fruit of people thinking that something's coming and what's said publicly is different, right? And I can't hold you accountable for that, but I can hold the district accountable for what was publicly put in a document that is on your board docs that my staff reviewed and listened to the hearing, right? And it was stated there that this pilot was occurring, not that we had concerns. Just an idea to give city schools an idea where to look to. Birmingham has an excellent program in which they specify and worked with the Department of Education in terms of creating guidance documents for school police forces, in terms of FERPA, and understanding what incidents should be entered into their systems, right? And this is an issue that came up from. Yes, sir. I'm adhering to the bell.
Thank you. Vice President Middleton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I want to, I guess, get back to safety and community engagement and just give an example of how, I guess, the school system and some of your leaders go beyond their call of duty to really help with the students. And this is particularly around Poly and Western and on Falls Road in Cold Spring. And I want to share this because I want the mayor's office to also know this. So it was really explained to the BM, and of course, you know how things go to the BMZA. And it really took, and Alice was the one that I feel really went beyond the call of duty to really support and push this very concerning thing. And everyone knows the very busy intersection between West Cold Spring Lane and Falls Road. The gas stations are there. We have a Dunkin' Donuts that has bought property that's going to turn into a drive-through Dunkin' Donuts. And there, I still don't understand how that was approved. The school principal, faculty, just, you know, kids are all over that place. And we already had a student hit on that street. This is a case where sometimes people that are on certain boards, they don't know the area, they don't understand. People come before them and try to explain situations. Nothing against the business. Everybody goes to Dunkin' Donuts. In fact, they are expanding. But to have something so close to that intersection when there's already problems, it's just mind-boggling. So, Alice, I just want to ask, because I want this to go to the BMZA. I just want you, you know, just to explain your experience, you know, just explain your experience and some of the difficulties, because you and the principals of that school, of those schools are, you know, it's about the safety of your children when they leave the schools and go home and go elsewhere. So I'll just let you comment on that. And I really like the administration to listen as well.
Appreciate that. Yeah, to the councilwoman's point, it was this was raised by parents' concerns about the area around that corner, which is a very dangerous corner. We have students coming up from the light rail and that are trying to get into the two schools, Western Poly, two large comprehensive high schools, and there's just a lot of traffic in that area. Recently, the city had put traffic calming measures along Falls Road that I think was not coordinated with the school, and so that had already directed a lot of traffic through the cut-through of the school. So instead of staying to the main road, people started using the school as a cut-through more than they already were because of that traffic calming measure. So not the intention of the traffic calming, it actually directed more cars to and put more students in harm's way. And then following that move to calm traffic and try to discourage people from using that area, then there was this discussion, there has been this discussion about providing a drive-through for Dunkin' Donuts in that same, right in that same area where the traffic calming is. So it just seemed like there was a lack of, I don't know, coordination between those two decisions didn't seem to be aligned. And so the parent raised it and the two principals came out to talk about the impact on their school community. They did not prevail. The drive-through was approved by the zoning commission, but they certainly showed up, and we got the research, and Councilwoman was very helpful in getting us some background about the zoning commission and how this works. And so they did show up to speak out for the young people, and we really remain very concerned about that area and the safety of our young people in that area.
Thank you for sharing that and doing what you and your team could do to try to help. But I don't think this should be the end of an example like that. We need to have all of our agencies working together with the safety of our children. So I know we have representatives here from the mayor's office, and I just wanted you to make note of that and just see if something could be revisited and discussed, because it was something that happened too fast for even to have more discussion about it. And I'll stop there.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. sticking with safety, and then I have some other questions on another round. We heard from the Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement yesterday about the, I don't know the formal name of it, but they're working on getting additional staff and violence intervention in the schools, in 4 schools. And there's a lot of excitement about it. I'm glad it's happening. There's a lot of questions still relative to the timeline, as well as the resources will be provided by Monsi, but then there will be, in some schools, there will be another entity that will be providing those services. One of the things that was mentioned, and I did not know this until yesterday, even though I have one of the schools in my district, is that there is working to be an MOU between the school system and Monsi regarding this, the 4 schools and the work being done in the 4 schools. So could you let me know about the timeframe for this? One of the things that we're concerned about is, well, I'll just speak for myself, that I'm concerned about is we really need this by when school starts. We needed it last year when it was announced. And so September is tomorrow. And so I want to just make sure that we are on task, at least in the school system side, that MOU will be negotiated and done. Luckily, it doesn't have to go to the BOE, but I do want to make sure that is being taken care of.
Yes, I appreciate that, Councilwoman. Yes, so the MOU is with Monsi. So I think, drafted. I was just waiting for a text back on that. Yeah, so we drafted the MOU, and it's with Monsi, so we're waiting on their comments. So that's where it is.
So it's still on the you've negotiated in terms of everybody knows what the goals are and what's going to happen. You're just now putting everything on paper.
We're putting on paper into a memorandum of understanding. So we took a crack at drafting it, and it is it's with the city, it's with Monsi.
Mm-hmm. And so, and what I guess I thought that maybe because it was something that is coming in from Monsi, I guess you needed to be able to have an MOU so that there would be an understanding about
yes, about roles and responsibilities and who's paying for
background checks, all of that stuff.
That's right. And it's building, a lot of the work is in place. Some of these partners are in place in the school. They're embedded in the school. Yala is one of the partners, and they are working with the school community already. And so I know Monsi has been working with the schools to identify the existing partners and build on the work that's already happening in the schools, so that when the MOU is finalized, that it is continuing existing work that's already in place.
And the name of those other organizations that are doing the work that they're partnering with would also be in there, so that everybody knows.
That's right. So
what's
knows
going
who the
on
partners are and what their responsibilities are, and about the work they'll be doing together.
Great. Well, I will certainly be keeping track of that because we really do need to have this for the beginning of the school year.
Appreciate, yeah, no, and it's important work, and we look forward to it getting off the ground.
Thank you.
Colin. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, thank you, Dr. Sanalisis and your team. Saw in the budget, glad to see some funds going toward restorative practices. Again, want to thank Director Goodwin. Just really refreshing to have just the partnership between the Student Wholeness Office, my friend at the School Board of Commissioners, the City Council, the whole host of community-based organizations like Holistic Life Foundation, really hoping that we can accelerate the emphasis on restorative practices and bring in all these great groups that we have in our city, which I know has been something that you have done as school CEO, is lean into organizations like We Are Us and many, many, many others. I am hoping, given the repeated issues, the mental health crisis that we still see with our kids, I'm really hoping that we can continue to accelerate that work and see it at all of our schools in Baltimore and really address and adopt a restorative, trauma-responsive approach across city schools. So wanted to, I know you and I have talked about this a lot over the years, but wanted to see where you all were, and again, appreciate the financial commitment and seeing some real energy and effort among your team, but just wanted to get a sense from you where we are going in terms of that body of work.
No, thank you, Councilman Cohen. And again, I'm sure we definitely have folks who could also speak to this, many of whom I know you already speak with. But I do want to acknowledge, one, Councilman, your longstanding, interest and investment in making sure that restorative practices is something that all schools have access to, and really pleased, frankly, with the uptick. I remember sitting in this chamber and you asking how many schools, and we were much lower at that time when you first asked the question of how many schools had undergone training. And I think under the direction of Executive Director Goodwin, as well as Chief Place Jose, the advantage of having people in these roles who were school leaders in Baltimore City is that they bring an up-close, up-front understanding of the importance of it. So we're now over 100 schools solid. And I remember when you first asked that question and I was clicking in my head, and tonight I made sure that, I had the number and I had it there. And I think what that represents is a shift, frankly, from first offering, right, up. If you want restorative practices, if you're ready for it, which I think characterized some of the early years, to frankly a far more direct guidance around, conversations where, look, there's an uptick in your school. There's some indicators that we are seeing, and I think that's helped. So those more kind of direct conversations between principals, supervisors, and schools. But I will also say, to the credit of our school leaders, our teachers, I will say a silver lining with some of the challenges that we're coming out of with violence in Baltimore City, that it frankly didn't take much convincing. And so some of that kind of spike and increase of folks at the school level who want the training, who've undergone the training, who, additional, I think, 40 schools that have intensive support. I think it is the silver lining in everything we as a city have really been pushing forward with. I think the other piece in terms of, you asking where I sit, but it's also where we sit as a full organization. And you've noted Commissioner Mohammed's leadership on the board's new Safety and Wholeness Committee. And I think what that also signifies is a level of investment from the board level that signals it's an organizational commitment. It's not just my commitment. It's not, Executive Director Goodwin's commitment, but I think we're at a place where we realize as the institution of school that if we don't prioritize this, that what's going to happen is all of the other pieces that we put on slides are not going to move forward. And I would say that that's more of a district-wide understanding that goes beyond who you see in this chamber. And it's because of the on-the-ground work. So I see us increasing in this area. I know that Dr. Place Jose and Executive Director Goodwin have been working on the longer-term plan to build on where we are now. A lot of it, frankly, is still tied to the time and how we prioritize time, given the amount of development. But the great part about having now over 100 schools that have fully gone through training is it gives a foundation that then enables us to go to the next level, which I know is something that you've really been pushing for, that it's not just a surface training, but what does it mean to actually have an entire school culture built on that. So I'm actually confident. I am anticipating a very robust plan, and particularly when we're in this chamber next year, the same increases that you saw, about an hour ago, you should also see that increasing next year.
No, I really appreciate that, and just appreciate your evolution and leadership in that space. And I also want to shout out Dr. Brooks from the mayor's team, who I think has been a really good partner on our end in all those conversations. And look, it is simply my goal that we close the gaps across our agencies, that a child should experience a restorative, trauma-responsive approach when they're in school, when they're at the rec center, when they're in the library, when they're in, ideally, when you talk about the next level, that we're working with parents, and we're working with community, and we're working with our senior centers. I think that we, as a city, have a lot of unlearning to do when it comes to how we relate to each other, how we hold each other accountable, how we engage and build relationships. And I am really excited about the progress that I think City Schools is earnestly making. And you know me, if I didn't feel that way, I would not be sitting here saying so. And again, it's why I think continuing to have you in this seat and continuing to have your leadership in their seats is extremely important in this moment as we finally get the funds from Annapolis and frankly from Baltimore that our children deserve through the blueprint. So again, we'll look forward to seeing that portfolio fully expanded to all of our schools and to taking that next step and bringing it to the next level, but do want to note and appreciate the progress made. Thank you.
Torrance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Back to school police. I have about 6 more questions to get through, but I'm gonna start off with, I'm deeply, gravely concerned with your officers' training. Given the incident in which an officer failed to properly enforce a peace order that put the lives of an entire school community as well as the initial family in danger. With that, I would like to request a formal letter from City Schools with a commitment to accept training from the Baltimore City Police Department to supplement the field training of your officers beyond just the Maryland State Police Training Academy.
Councilman, are you going to send that request over in writing?
I sure will.
Thank you very much, sir.
And for my question, have we done an audit of school police overtime? I've had concerns related to, as I'm inheriting Shake and Bake, as well as other sites where officers were supposed to be for overtime but not show up. So have we done an audit given the concerns that you have with the Department of Justice as well as other issues that you had in the district?
So thank you for the question, Councilman Torrance. One of the things that we have really over the last year delved very deeply into is an issue, I would say, of just being able to monitor the data on police time. So while previously we may have, quote, done an audit and actually done that, I think one of the things that we found is actually that the full complement of data that is necessary to be able to have robust adjustments in things like timekeeping, in things like, where people are reporting and how, is one of the priorities we had, and actually we presented to the board. We added new positions specifically around data and record keeping, because what we found was that part of the challenge of surfacing that data was the fact that our data collection was frankly probably 4 to 5 decades old. And so part of the investment we're making now is into new technology that will give us far more precise information about overtime. We are in the process, and Major Coleman has done this under consultation with Chief Sivan and Chief Perkins Cohen around what those new processes and procedures are. It will also be one of the charges to whomever is named as the next full-time chief of school police. So what I would say is, yes, we have done an audit, but I think the full audit that both you and I would anticipate is necessary to be able to track at a 21st century level time is now part of the investments we are making in the infrastructure, because the level of data that we need to be able to cross-check just was not there. Not when you're still working with manila folders and graph paper. Actually, you've got to be able to make investments, and I think that we as a school system, with the board's support, have made those investments, but happy to give you an update on that as we move forward.
By August 30th, please.
All right.
An update by August 30th, please.
Sure, and that'll be an update of where we are.
Just where you are. I mean, I understand, like, you can't go from
Manila
1970 to 2024. I mean, we still, with Workday, have our officers geotag when they sign in for overtime, so we know if you actually signed in. We now can remote into your actual Axon system now to make sure you are there and where you are. Or if you are not answering the call, we know where you are now because of Officer Holly, right? But I think I would like to have an update so I can help with requests to our police department to learn from their actual institutional knowledge and how they've curved overtime costs, but accountability around it to assist you as well.
Thank you. Vice President Middleton.
I know you mentioned the Judy Center strategies and the success, which I'm very supportive of. I'd just like to request a updated list of where they are all located. And also would like you to, I know you have partnerships with the Family League as well, and I know that they also have that they're interested in expanding the Hippie program, which has been a very successful program in Park Heights, which is connecting parents with children and teaching them how to work together to help their children at home and being parents. And it's a good conversation to have with the executive director of the Family League. And again, the program is called the Hippie program. They have a graduation and everything. It's just, and like I said, they're interested in expanding. I don't know if you want to add any more comments about the Judy centers.
I'd love to say that when we look at our kindergarten readiness, when we track the children who attend a Judy Center, that is the highest performing group. So we do have the data that shows that when we have those opportunities with our youngest learners, along with their caregivers, their fathers, their mothers who are involved in that space, and we're able to provide services beyond what we think of sort of as academics, but sort of wrap around, we just see incredible results in a number of measures. And so it is something that we're proud of, and we have the most in Maryland. And we recently had all of the coordinators from the Judy Centers come to North Avenue and get an opportunity sort of to share their stories and the colleagues across the district, because we talk about them a lot, but to hear our Judy Center coordinators speak about the work they do, the love, the passion, the commitment they bring to their work, it's inspiring. And I encourage all of you to get a chance to feel good, go to a Judy Center and see the great work that we're doing in those sites.
And I know there is one located at Liberty Elementary.
Absolutely.
So
yes.
any information you could share with the council would be
Absolutely.
appreciated, and we could help spread that word as well.
Thank you. Yep.
Ramos.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had the opportunity to attend the school board meeting the other day, and I'm grateful that I did, because in addition to the advocacy we did, thank you very much to the board for voting for the City College contract at UB. I was able to learn, based on a presentation that was given about the enrollment, and that 20% of the student body now are English language learners. That's significant. And that one of the first slides that we saw has, our enrollment, eligible enrollment going up, that is our English language learners right there. So it was also clear, there was testimony that evening from parents who were speaking Spanish, that there are not enough interpreters, where we're working to get our students to learn English, which is important. There's still this opportunity to improve on making sure that the parents are also involved and are able to communicate with the teachers. There's a lot there that I think we still need to do for our English language learners and their families, especially since the 20% I would predict in the next 5 years is going to be at least 30%, frankly. And so having those opportunities for our Spanish speakers in particular, but also we're getting people from all over the world, frankly, which is really great for our city. I want to just know a little bit more, because it's not really spelled out in all of this, and I believe when we talked after the meeting that there's a further deeper assessment being done. If you could talk a little bit more about that. And then with the blueprint, whether there's going to be that additional, we're going to need more support for these
Colleagues,
families.
do we have any concerns
So,
with giving?
I'm finished. She's going to answer now. Thank you.
Perfect.
Great, thank you, Councilwoman Rimas. And it's great that you remember that brief conversation and that data point. I will say, we have seen this coming. It is one of the things that, and even though she can't be here this evening, Chief High Hubbard has been a longtime advocate of making sure that at the very basic level of translation, that all of our families are able to engage. As you noted, it is still not enough, and in this year's budget, we are actually adding additional supports for our multilingual learners and their families as they enter city schools. That is a kind of major challenge in making sure and providing them with that support. You'll also see that actually you probably wouldn't see because it's a smaller line item, but something as simple as providing even electronic translation, AI translation to every single school, because one of the things in a larger presentation that I know Chief High Hubbard and Chief Dabrowski actually did before to Cabinet this past week, one of the things that we're seeing is that while we still have about 11 to 14 schools that are heavily, like over 30, 40%, over 50% multilingual learners, what is different than when I entered Baltimore City as Chief Academic Officer now 14, 15 years ago is literally all of our schools have multilingual learners. It's not just a handful anymore. And so that investment in technology for all schools is one of the ways that we have said we have to be committed to every family, regardless of which school they attend, being able to have that access. I think the landscape analysis that you referenced is really our, and again, under Chief High Hubbard's leadership, she's playing mommy this evening for her son's graduation, but she really spearheaded a very deep landscape analysis that will look at every area of city schools functioning to say how in each area, whether it's human capital, whether it's technology, whether it's teaching and learning, how are we doing in terms of our service and support of multilingual learners? And we feel as if that outside eye, that outside pair of eyes and assessment, from there we will then present to the board some of our next step plans to service and support and bring in our multilingual learners. I know Chief Dabrowski's here, and she has also been very forthright. It's why we have even changed our language in city schools to center language diversity as an asset. And so we had to do our own look in the mirror. But Chief Dabrowski, I don't know if you want to add anything.
The one piece that I'll add is the work that our Multilingual Enrollment Support Center, what we call MESC, does for our families. So at North Avenue, we welcome multilingual families as they come into our community. And we know that the large numbers of families is increasing every year. So part of our investment for fiscal '25 is more support as we welcome families into our community. It requires a level of care and nurturing as we're thinking about looking sometimes at transcripts or important documentation that is in a different language. And so needing that support. And we need to do it when families are available to come. So we need to make sure that it's open 5 days a week or sometimes on evenings. And so that's work that we're doing alongside as Chief High Cupboard is looking holistically. So as we center in on that, that is one piece. I would also say our work around English language development and the intentionality of where we're putting our district support. So as Chief Doherty was showing some of the centrally funded positions, we're being very strategic about how they're deployed, which school they go to, in order to match this fast-moving, changing demographic and making sure our people are exactly where they need to be to support that changing, again, a school we have few schools that have jumped huge double digits over the course of 1 or 2 years. So we have to be nimble about where we're putting our support.
And we still need more.
And we still need more.
We still need more.
I think it was 90, so Chair McFadden and I were in a board meeting just right before here where 98 countries are represented in our schools. I mean, it is significant, the vast number of languages that we're supporting.
So Councilwoman Ramos, if we can also just lift up some of our partners, right? Because there are some partnerships that exist because we need that balance, but we also need the support of others to kind of help us steer the district and our schools in the right direction to offer even more. We heard from Dr. Smith today at Falstaff, who's learning Spanish, right? Because it's not just learning the language, but also understanding the culture and how all of our families want the best for their young people. But can you all lift some of those partnerships? There are multiple partners that we have to kind of balance, but we're always looking for more opportunities to support our young people.
Do you want to lift up some of the partnerships? I was going to say, I would love to just share the presentation that lists the different sort of partnerships that we have, that we've been working with, because again, the MESC team works across different places across the city to try to help, whether it's around settlement pieces and where the locations are for housing and things. Certainly providing social work supports to ensure there are often pieces that our families need around sensitive topics, and so how we're helping them get to the resources they need while also trying to make sure that we have all the paperwork we need to get them placed appropriately. But no, I'm happy to provide that. I don't want to give details now without having all of it.
Sure. No, I'll follow up with your office. And also, just say that technology is fine, but that does not beat making sure that we've got the people in the room that a parent can relate to and that understands what a parent might be going through, because people come here for various reasons, or people have been, there's some parents that have been here for many, 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 many years and haven't learned English, and that's okay, and still have, want to be able to communicate regarding their student. We also need to make sure in the deep dive that is being done, talking about the testing as well. This is something that, as you know, my chief of staff has worked on when she was at city schools. Because we should not be penalizing our students because they're learning English and the tests are in English. They shouldn't be penalized for that. And we need to have a solution for that issue, which I do not think we have. And that affects where they go to high school, that affects, their scores. That is a big deal. And I realize that's probably something we need to discuss with the state as well. And I'd be happy to work with that and get other Latino leaders across the state because I think that's really critical. So what I'm talking about is not just one aspect. This is like a really big deal across the system, up, down, and out, as I say. And
colleagues, any concerns with giving Councilwoman Ramos another minute?
Thank you. Thank you. And so I'm really looking forward to the assessment, but also, making sure that we've got the commitment. And I don't see any Latinos in your leadership, right? I mean, that's critical to have. I will do my best to get a Latino board member, okay? I will do it, at more than one, actually. So I take responsibility on that as well. I think it's all of us working on this together because our population is going to end up growing because of all of the people who are coming to Baltimore City speaking all of these great languages, or the people that are here for a long time being confident in the schools and sending their kids to the schools. So I want to make sure that we're doing all of that, and also making sure that we're communicating with our other council members. This is something that we're dealing with citywide in terms of what are the supports that in our offices we can offer to families, or be able to say, hey, talk to so-and-so in your school, or talk to so-and-so, okay? So I think we need to do kind of all of that. Thank you.
Colin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, thank you to Dr. Sanelises and the entire team. We discussed this before, and I was talking to Monsi about it last night, but deeply concerned about the role of social media with our young people. Terrified of when my daughter and my son get a cell phone. The cyberbullying, the body shaming, and I think the enormous amount of conflict that gets exacerbated and becomes violence because of Instagram, because of TikTok, because of YouTube, because of these platforms. And I've also heard from your principals that it is an enormous drain on their time having to chase around rumors about social media meetups where someone's gonna get banked or beat up because that's what's going around on Instagram. From the district perspective, what are we doing? What can we do to get in front of this challenge? And this is not unique to Baltimore. Every single city in America, every single city probably in the world is dealing with it. But are there some lessons we can learn from other places? Because I just think this is an elephant in the room that is doing enormous harm to our children.
No, thank you. Thank you, Councilman, because it is a very large issue. It is an elephant in the room. I think where we are now is we are actually part of a lawsuit, a national lawsuit around this particular issue and the role of social media companies and the impact on our young people. And I think in large part, even though we weren't sure we wanted to be part of the lawsuit initially because just of time, part of why I believe that we were identified is because of exactly some of the challenges that you are stating. I will say this, that one of the things that I have been contemplating bringing to the board is consideration of a banning of cell phones during the school day. So when you ask for best practices, we know from one of our own schools, Hampstead Hill Academy, the immediate shifts in culture that were impacted when that ban took place during the school day. We know in other school districts that are moving in that direction. I think high school is challenging. And so I'm a low-hanging fruit person. And so Chief Sivan and I have had some initial conversations. We're clearly not at the place right now to say anything. That has to be brought to the board. It has to be vetted because it would be policy. But I will tell you that there are a number of schools on their own that are that are actually contemplating this, that it is real, the impact is real. As the mother of 3 teenage girls, who I thought I waited long enough by saying you had to be in the second half of 8th grade. I will tell you, if I had to do it over again, I would say you can't have a cell phone till after sophomore year in high school. It is that intrusive. And the evidence grows daily of the negative impact on our young people. So we are looking into it. I will say this, that our school leaders have also said, our educators have said how frustrated they are. There are possible aspects of it. I don't want to act as if, it's some big evil specter, but the evidence is growing nationally and internationally. There are other countries, ministries of education that are moving in this direction. So, I'm just speaking from the place we are now. I don't, have a policy recommendation for the board yet, but I do want to say here publicly and on record that I absolutely am deliberating that move just based on what we are seeing.
Yeah,
And just,
no,
can I add one thing? And
Yes,
that
ma'am.
as we plan for next year's board policy, the board policy calendar has the revisions to the cell phone policy on the calendar. So Dr. Santelises is indicating that we're going to work with the board to make changes. It is on the calendar for next year because we know it's a pressing issue. And then the other thing I just wanted to highlight about the lawsuit is that we've also been selected as a bellwether district for that lawsuit because the feeling was that Baltimore City is representative of a lot of critical areas in the country that we should be represented as part of the voice of that, like a more vocal partner of that lawsuit. So we will be, that lawsuit will be coming here so that people can hear from Baltimore City implications on us, on our students.
that is good to hear. And I appreciate that. And we'll just say, as a Hampstead Hill dad, I do think the culture has vastly improved there, and in part as a result of that policy. Look, I think it's hard to implement, to your point, at the high school level. It's going to be tough, but I think it's important, and I think part of the challenge too is when young people are after school. That's where you see a lot of this, when kids, unfortunately, family members getting involved in conflicts and online conflicts. It's a lot, but I do think taking some aggressive steps at the risk of angering all the children in our city, I think is a good move. And I personally would support it because it is the level of harm that these platforms have done to particularly our preteen children and particularly our girls is pretty devastating.
I just add one more point that I would be remiss if we didn't acknowledge and thank the leadership of our Chief Legal Counsel, Josh Sibin, who's been really attentive to this and a leader in it, and was the one who really advocated that we be part of this lawsuit because of the importance of it. So he's not here tonight, but I can tell you he's fiercely texting me about everything that's happening. He's watching it, so.
Thank you.
Vice President Middleton, and then Torrance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and this is my last question. So the enterprise fund, and I know that helps to supply for meals in all of the schools. I guess that's breakfast and lunch mostly. And we know how important students getting healthy food and meals. Is there a connection? Each of our districts have at least one urban farm, and as Chair McFadden had mentioned about the importance of partnerships, are there any creative ideas to kind of partner with some of the urban farms that are near schools to kind of help with maybe expanding the supper program or just some creative things? Some of these urban farms participate in the farmers markets, like at Druid Hill Park, and they're expanding themselves to do other things. Is there a connection with the school because they're growing these healthy foods? And again, it's a nice connect between community, school, and the urban farm. Comments on that?
Thank you for that question. The short answer is yes, Food and Nutrition does partner with certain urban farms. I will get a list of them. I do, and I think some of them are not just farms that happen to be in the city, but that are, they bill themselves as urban farms. And as I think most people know on the committee, but perhaps for people listening at home, we're proud of the Great Kids Farm that we have. We think of it as pretty unique. I don't know for sure that no other large district has one, but we think it's pretty unique. And we, both with student groups and others, grow a wide range of fruits and vegetables in tandem with having educational visits there. The problem that Great Kids Farm has, problem in quotes, is the same one that I know we have with some of our urban farms with whom we very energetically partner. It's that the volumes that we need to do something for our kids are so high that, we could basically can and do sometimes take an entire harvest of a small farm, and that's a couple of days at most of supply. But that doesn't mean just because they can't be like Coastal Produce or some big provider, we don't do anything. We actually really like the whole gestalt of having urban farms that work with us and work with our kids. And I'll get a list of the exact names of them tomorrow.
Thank you, appreciate that.
Thank you.
And about you don't have a supper program anywhere?
Oh, we do. Yeah, we have breakfast, lunch, snack, and supper.
At all the schools?
Almost all the schools, yes. And our supper is kind of earlier in the evening, often for kids in aftercare or after-school sports. We'll have it, 4-ish, 3:30, 4-ish. And so it's partly why it's supper and not dinner.
Could you give us a list, too, of where the suppers are?
Oh, with pleasure.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Torrance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Back to school police. In accordance with your MOU, I made it clear to the Baltimore City Police Department that we have to discuss your concurrent jurisdiction. And for Chief Sivan, who's listening, this is going to be very explicit. Curfew. Going to and from school, right? I have issues in my district with curfew in Walbrook Junction, Hamden, as well as Mondawmin. I've had to use the Western, the Northwestern, and the Northern District NCO officers to escort young people out of buildings. I've even had the state intervene with their agents from the Treasury, the Comptroller's Office as well, to enforce other laws to ensure that our young people don't enter these facilities. What I find is that school police has passed the buck in terms of what their authority is with young people entering these buildings after and during school hours. So to prelude this, I have gotten a commitment from BPD that they will no longer be doing the enforcement and that we're going to require that your officers do the enforcement because they're trained to interact with young people. I just want to give you a heads up to that because that will be a part of your negotiations for your new MOU. I just want to be frank for the public. Given the frustrations I had with school police, I think when their new chief does come on, and I agree with you, we have to discuss that MOU and be very specific about officers' authority. Given that they all went to the Maryland State Police Training Academy. Related to that, I have concerns about the shifts for Baltimore City Schools Police. A lot of our schools get out at 3 or around 3. The shift changes at 3 o'clock for officers. I think that is an interesting inflection point, given what happened to multiple young men who were paraded on social media with their bare bodies during those hours. This is why I asked a question related to supervision of young people 15 minutes before school and after school. So I want a commitment from city schools that you will add a policy to your board policy agenda for that, because I want principals to be held accountable for where their staff is positioned at the beginning of school and after school. I say that because I witnessed young people entering.
Councilman, colleagues, do we have a concern with giving Councilman Torrance another minute? Please continue.
Appreciate you. I witnessed young people entering several of my buildings in our schools, our babies, entering buildings, but staff were not engaged in them 15 minutes before. A member of your senior staff told me I did not see that thing until I sent you images and video of those young people doing it. The school police officer said they couldn't cross the street because that was not in their authority. What I need is a commitment from city schools is that we work in tandem to create a policy for principals, because a number of your leadership teams and buildings, if they're positioned in the right position, young people will come into your building. Young people will safely board buses. I think this policy is important because I could tell you when I pull up to my son's school where the principal, the assistant principal, the hall monitor, as well as administrative team is positioned before school and after school. I cannot tell you that at Carverville Tech, Matthew A. Henson, to give you an example, Sway, right? These are important issues because young people's safety are engaged. And the people who know them the most are the administrators in those buildings. So I think that,
3 minutes.
all right, I'll wrap it up. I would like a commitment that this will be on your board policy agenda for the next school year.
Thank you, Councilman Torrance, and thank you for lifting what you lifted. We'll look at the calendar to see how we can perhaps incorporate some of this maybe into existing policies that already exist. But I will also say, and certainly the CEO will chime in and her staff will, this is it's an issue for all of us, but as a school administrator, myself, you know, there are a myriad of responsibilities for entry and exit. And so to attempt to codify something in policy that mandates specific staff members, we might have to really look into that. But certainly other staff perhaps could, depending on how schools are set up. I think also some of the additional responsibilities, if adding at the beginning or the end of the day, would certainly have to be negotiated with our union partners and our collective bargaining units as well. And so certainly, entertaining it certainly, and we'll consider some way, some shape or form, how to incorporate it in the upcoming year as we're actually reviewing the calendar for the upcoming year.
Thank you, and I will tell you that I have had these conversations with your union partners, and they're actively engaged in this conversation about moving this forward because they recognize that that is a culture and climate. What I will say from sitting at a table with a school administration team that did not implement a plan that they had written out in terms of entry and exit, this is important in terms of accountability to school leaders. I know the chief of schools has been a school leader. I'm pretty sure she had a plan in place. This is old school teaching how to actually run a building, right? This is what I learned from working in city schools, from hearing principals, right? That is one of my gravest concerns about even within city schools leadership. I don't see a number of people in senior leadership positions that actually served as a building leader. And that troubles me because when we implement things, building leaders need that guidance. They need someone who understands the complexity of balancing not only being the smiley face that handles administrative things, but being there for staff people who emotionally need them to be present, as well as being instructional leaders, disciplinarians in some instances. I think this is an important move forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Could I just
Please.
say one thing, Chair? The only other piece that I would add to what Chair McFadden said about the request to add policy is really connected to what you ended with, Councilman Torrance, and I would say, while policy is fine, a lot of this is also an implementation and a practice issue, which I think your last comments highlighted. I will say, with the Chief Place Jose here, that this has been a point of discussion. One, in terms of how we support newer leaders, early career leaders. It is a supervision question, but it is also a support question because there are a lot of things that we are asking principals to do in 2024 that we were not asking them to do even 10 or 15 years ago. Thank you, even 5 years ago. And so completely appreciate the idea of a whole and complete view of school leadership. What we are also working on is making the role manageable. And what that means is looking comprehensively at how you use your leadership team, how you use other people in the school, exactly, all staff, and taking a comprehensive look at that. So I will say that Chief Place Jose, when she was deputy chief of schools for, what was it, like 8 weeks, it seems like, even in her early days, she spent a lot of time this year really revamping the training and development for our school leader supervisors, as well as our school leaders. And I think that there's work that we still need to do under Executive Director Goodwin's purview around some of those practices across a school. So I do just want to acknowledge that it is both, that it is, it is absolutely can be a policy consideration, and I would say, even if even if the board does make changes to policy, it's still gonna, at the end of the day, be an implementation issue. And so that's part of what we're trying to balance at the same time that we are trying to not make the role of principal, frankly, undoable and unattractive. So just wanted to add that. Thank you, Chair Costello.
Thank you. Cohen?
Does that work? Oh, great. Chief Perkins Cohen, the Canton Middle School building has kind of sat there and languished for almost 8 years that I've been a councilman. It's, we have overcrowded schools, as you know, in Southeast Baltimore. I think would really like to see a school building there. My hope is that it does not just go toward more condos and apartments, but I think the highest and best use is a school, or is the extension of one of the schools that already exists in Southeast Baltimore, or anywhere in the city. So any updated plans, thoughts on that building?
Yes, thank you for the question, and I agree with you. It is it's been a longstanding concern. Just to give a little bit of background on the Canton Middle building for others, I know you have this background, Councilman Cohen, is that it is a building that we had identified as a renovation building in the original 21st century buildings plan. It was going to be one of the schools. It was going to be the school in the Southeast that was going to be renovated. There was some community opposition to it, and a fair bit of resistance to it. So in the end, we moved the investment in that resource to do additions on Commodore John Rogers and Highland Town to relieve the overcrowding. To the councilman's point, there is overcrowding in that area that has continued with the influx of multi-language learners. So when that investment from 21st Century moved out of that facility, the challenge is that now to even open the doors on that building is several $1 million. I mean, years ago it was $10 million. I'm sure it's well north of that now. We did at one point offer it to charters to see if they were interested, and charters also didn't have the resources to kind of get it going. We are now looking doing analysis on whether we can find a partner who could potentially do a partnership where maybe we renovate the facility to do some combination, some mixed use combination where maybe some portion of it is retail or housing, but then some portion of it is reserved for us to have potentially an early learning center there, for example, to help relieve the overcrowding. Again, don't have a firm idea of what that would look like, but we are trying to explore ways to bring in other partners to help finance it, because the challenge is that we don't really have the resources to renovate it, but we do need to, and we can't walk away from it, to your point, because we need space in that area. So we are kind of in this difficult situation. And Dr. Washington's done a lot of work on it too. So Dr. Washington, if there's anything I left out or you want to add, please do. No, yeah.
No, I appreciate that. And I think an early learning center, mixed use would be great. I mean, I think it solves multiple problems potentially over there. I just don't want to see the building continue to decay. It is a blight, and it is frustrating for the neighbors because, anytime we have a building that's sitting, just languishing for 8, 9, 10 years, it causes all kinds of negative externalities and problems in the neighborhood. So I would just ask that the next time you all come before this committee, that there is a real plan for that building and one that we can execute in a reasonable time frame, because it's been a very, very long time. And to your point, we have pretty severe overcrowding in Southeast. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to add my support for what Councilman Cohen said a little while ago. My daughter's school, public school, also has a cell phone ban during the day, and I am so happy about that. And I really think that that is the way to go. That is absolutely the way to go. I was I had to fill in for a teacher at Mervo one time, and that was a distraction, and it was frustrating for everybody. So anyway, that would be super. Got my support. Let us know what you need. My question is related to CTE. We're expanding CTE opportunities across the system for, as part of the blueprint. And that's wonderful and great. I represent Mervo and Reach that are both CTE schools. And my frustration is that I need our kids to have jobs right after graduation. So there has to be a more formal way of making sure that there's pathways, because when I asked about it at one of the schools, the direction was, well, if you've got somebody who wants to be a partner, send them over to the community schools coordinator. That's not how that should go, right? If somebody's got an opportunity to provide pathways to a job or apprenticeship or internship or something, it needs to be more formalized, so that our kids that are, working on the building trades go into building trades apprenticeships, which are already all approved by the state. That our students who are, nursing track go into, work at the hospital. Like, the fact that we still don't have a formal way of making sure that those pathways are there just is mind-blowing. And so I'm reflecting on the CTE report from about 5 years ago, I guess, where the Fund for Educational Excellence basically said that, a very low percentage of our young people that are in CTE education at that time were getting, jobs in their careers that they had, or they were, nor were they getting, higher paid jobs, right, where they should be. Like, a student who is getting into the building trades should be making triple what I'm making, frankly, right? And so making sure that those pathways are there in a very formal way has to occur. So I'm curious, especially now that we're actually going beyond just the 5 or 6 schools. I'm almost
Colleagues,
done.
anyone have a concern with giving Councilwoman Ramos another minute?
Thank you. We're going beyond just those schools now to every school. So now it's going to be harder to do this. So what is the plan to make sure that those pathways are actually much more formalized?
So thank you so much for the question, and it is a top of mind question that our new Executive Director for Secondary Success and Innovation, he has been working very hard as he's come into the role, taking stock of where we are. So our new pathway forward, which was the strategic plan released in 2021, continues to be sort of the North Star for us and where we are. And we have made incredible progress since 2021. So I do want to just share a few things. So we do now have over 200 employer and community partners who are supporting this work. We have, since again, 2020, over 9,600 students who have started to take CET courses. Now, that's not getting that full pathway, so we know that it's the beginning, it's not the finish line. And what we've tracked is when we start to look at how many are in 2 courses, how many actually then pass 3 out of the 4 courses, then how many actually finish the pathway, the numbers come down. But what we have seen is the growth over time. Now, your point around how are we making sure there's more of a formal way in which we're supporting those young people. So one of the investments as part of the blueprint has been these career coaches. And so we're seeing those now in our schools. This is the first year of implementation, and it was a very ambitious that we'd have 53 of them, right? We have 22 right now. And there is that commitment that we will hire to get all of our schools to have those career coaches, because it's exactly what you're saying, that adult in the school who can help guide that young person to ensure they're taking the right courses, then preparing for the exam so that they can pass the exam. I will say that in terms of working with our partners, our young people who are looking for work-based learning opportunities are going into situations where there may be somebody in their 20s who's also going for that opportunity. So we are really trying to forge a path here so that there's access. And so while we certainly have had wonderful spaces of growth and our expansion of where programs reside, it continues to be a work in progress for us to make sure we have the opportunities for our, so City Schools is doing all that we can as far as we continue to sort of build the infrastructure. We are going to continue to need those partners reaching across and saying, yes, we want that 16-year-old, 17-year-old to come and have this work-based learning opportunity. So that's that shared piece. And that's a lot of the partnership. We are so fortunate to have so many partners who support us. And we all, again, with some of these new guidelines coming from MSDE about what it means to be career ready, is really setting a trajectory around how many courses you need to take, what's the sequence of courses, what's an approved course. So it is rapidly evolving work the way it needs to be, and lots of people are coming to the table, but I just do want to lift up the progress that we have made because of the investments. I mean, $14 million just in sort of growing these things, and then the ability to use some of our ESSER dollars to make sure we have the materials, equipment to run those CTE programs, trying to get flexibility around who we can hire to make sure that we're bringing in the best types of CTE educators. That's the other piece to lift up here, is having someone who is both skilled in their area of career technology and also an educator. So there are many layers of the work that are happening, and there is more work to do.
Yeah, thank you. I know that Mervo's robotics team and robotics class is, award-winning, and I want to make sure that those young people are, working at, name it.
Absolutely.
I think that's really critical. So I appreciate the work on that. And again, I think the career coaches is a good idea because the community schools coordinator is very busy already. With a lot of stuff, and so and it's not they're not the experts in the field relative to CTE to be able to say, here's the pathways that we have, here's the career, you know what I mean? I just think it needs to be much more formalized, and if we can get those, you said there's 53 positions open, or 53 positions, 22 that are hired, and you're going to get more for the next school year. I want to make sure Mervo has one. I want to make sure Reach has one, two, actually, each. And, to be able to make sure that they're a lot. And then I'm happy to bring more partners to the table. I think that there are people that are very interested in working with our young people and being a part of the solution. I mean, that's the thing about our city is that everybody wants to be involved, so I think it's great. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilman Thorne. Oh,
Sorry,
go.
can I just add one thing, is that I just want to highlight too that partnership is, for those 53 coaches, is with the Mayor's Office of Employment Development, and so Mackenzie Garvin has been a great partner on that.
She did describe it a little bit the other day when I asked her, so I'm familiar. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. As a former CTE completer and person who's certified still in C++ and what?
Councilman Torrance,
Yes, sir.
would you what is CTE, just for the awareness of some of the folks?
Career Technology Education, and as a proud graduate of Carverville Tech High School, who has a number of alumni, especially one of my friends, Damon, graduated with me, became a master electrician, now makes 3 times as much as I do in a day, who now is employing returning citizens to be electricians, a master electrician, actually lives in Guilford, never stepped foot in a college classroom, and makes over $2 million a year to do this work. So I think when I say that, that is a success story that we need to talk about in city schools, because I have a number of colleagues I went to school with, and as we were planning our 20th anniversary from high school, who are just doing great things in terms of their education. Unfortunately, I did not continue with my trade, as you can see. My next question for you guys is near and dear to my heart. I see the progress that we've made in academics, the growth that our young people are going through. But I had concerns, and this was raised by teachers who were in semester courses in our high schools. When we switched, my question was, what intentionality did we have in young people's IEPs to make sure that if you're taking 7 classes, how am I being given time for my actual IEP to be implemented? But in addition to that, how are we making sure that we're not making fake violations? I just want to be, and I say this full force as a person who benefited from learning in 11th grade that I had dyslexia. I had teachers and support that allowed me, while I was smart, listen, I was smart, I still wasn't performing to my full potential because I did not have the strategies that I do have today to do this job or any job or even survive law school. So I just want to make sure that while it is the right thing to do to switch and make it easier for classes and young people to transfer, I want to make sure that the small, low-hanging fruit of making sure I get my special ed time and my services is not lost in that sauce.
No, I appreciate the question, and I think just to provide the context, so part of the rationale for why we moved to that semester schedule, you may already know, but just for the public. So part of what we realized as part of our high school analysis work is that our existing schedules, which varied from high school to high school in some instances, actually was setting up a situation where students might not earn enough credits in the 4 years to actually be able to graduate. And so there needed to be a radical step back and redesign of how students could have course earning opportunities and time for course recovery within 4 years so that we could ensure students would meet that 4-year sort of finish line for high school. And you're absolutely right, that does have an impact for how we currently or had been writing IEP goals. And so what that means for someone who's now in a semester course versus a year-long course, we are currently working through some of those very important nuances. I'll be happy to provide an update. I want to get the most specific for you.
August 30th.
I got you.
I'm just keeping the date consistent for everybody.
No, appreciate it and heard and certainly will follow that up because it
Yeah.
has been raised. It was raised by a team of some of our colleagues out in the field, and it is something that the scheduling team is looking at very seriously.
And with that, can we look at retention data too after the school year is over with for our seniors and those who are completing? Because I think that one of my biggest issues that I had at city schools was BSA in terms of young people being able to make up the credits that they lost because of semesters, as well as with city as well, and making sure young people can stay in their rigorous educational program without having to play catch up and go other places. I want them to stay there. I want them to get everything that they need out of that opportunity, but I don't want what adults made easier for adults impact a young person.
No, I think that I'm sorry, were you going to say something, Chair?
I just wanted retention data specific to students receiving special education services or just retention data in?
Well, thank you. I'll do both.
I just wanted to make sure
No,
that we
no.
were clear so that staff is able to.
Well, this makes it clear for my chief of staff who just asked the same question. So yes.
Okay.
It makes it
Thank
easier
you
for
for
me.
that clarification.
Because it allows me to see how they're performing with their peers and then whatever supports that we can offer as well. Because I know that a number of community-based organizations, especially working with the Baltimore City Youth Fund, are looking at how they can support you guys. That's another question that's coming up for commitment to help with those community-based organizations in our schools and getting them ESSA certified. That's you too, Kim. I'm coming your way next. Just so that we can have that opportunity for young people to have people that they trust, but also we can also support those programs that have always been there for them as well in our buildings.
No, and I would just quickly only highlight this, that the other way that I think we're making sure that those young people don't get caught, and, within kind of the need to gain classes is also really expanding and increasing the offerings for credit recovery over the summer. And it's not just credit recovery, it's actually original credit. And for too long within city schools, it was only recovery. And I will tell you as a mom, my BSA freshman will be taking original credit this summer as a way of moving through and keeping her schedule clear for other things she wants to take. So I think one of the major theme is, one, I met with principals who also had concerns about the new schedule and really the charge to be responsive and to be nimble, because we know that, policy shifts are blunt changes, but we're going to have to nuance them. But I do also want to just highlight this fact that when we really looked, Baltimore City high school students were at a significant disadvantage in their opportunities to actually work through and gain credit. So it's not a minor thing.
And to our earlier conversation, the semester schedule allows more blocks of time for work-based learning opportunities to come in that junior and senior, 10th and 11th. And so, it is though, but that can't be at a cost of a student's IEP goals not being prioritized. So we have to do both and, so.
Trust me, I recognize it because I took classes at BCCC in my junior and senior year because I was able to take original credit. So I recognize the opportunities because I finished my CTE programming early. So I want to make sure that there's the light at the tunnel, but there's also, are we laying the tracks to get there? And I just want to make sure that that's there because I see the potential of our young people, even though that certain news stations don't see it every day. I see the strides that we made in terms of offering opportunities for young people to take college credit at least at 2 institutions, UB, which I'm near and dear proud of as a double graduate, but also at an HBCU in my district, Coppin State University, as well as BCCC, which is also in my district. I agree. I believe, I'm wrapping up, boss. I believe that, I just want to make sure that the low-hanging fruit is tight because this is an important move for our district and the work that you guys are doing.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Someone just sent me the recent compliance report, and I did not realize that the dropout rate for our Latino students is really significant. And so it's really high. And so my comment earlier about our multi-language learners and how important this is, it's really critical that we get this right. If we need to put more people I am not an educator, I've dealt with housing, I don't know what, that is, but if we have to get more people in the room to figure out how to do this, let's make that happen. But that would also mean that we're gonna need I think we're gonna need to deal with the money issue in terms of where this fits in with the blueprint, as well as, how to expand it. So my question related to this is, I was reading in your book, and we talked a little bit about it last year, so I want to just make sure that I'm clear. The blueprint also talks about concentration of poverty dollars, okay? And we no longer use free and reduced lunch as an indicator because every student in Baltimore City is allowed to get free lunch. So remind us how the state defines that, and I believe there may have been a change in the General Assembly, or we're trying to make a change in the General Assembly, because we do want those dollars to be in areas that we need it most, whether it's dedicated to our multilanguage learners or not. I'm just saying, the formula here was extremely confusing, and I wanted to just make sure that we're trying to address it so that our students that really need the dollars most are getting those dollars.
Yes, I appreciate the question. This has been an ongoing issue for a long time for city schools. So as you mentioned, we're a community eligibility provision district, which means we no longer collect forms. And so when the district made the switch to that program, which has a lot of benefits for our young people all eat for free.
We need it, yeah.
It's definitely reduced, it's had a real impact on food and stability for our students, so there's real benefits to it. But we don't have the individual poverty information that we used to have before. And so knowing that, when the school system switched over, we locked in the farms rate in the penultimate year that we collected forms, which was 84.9%. That data is from 2013. And that is still the way our poverty is counted. So the implications for that in the concentrations of poverty is that, for a while, the state was using a multiplier to count poverty. So they're under the federal guidelines. If you're a CEP district, they can also take your direct certification rate, which is direct certification is the number of students who are automatically certified in income eligibility eligibility programs like TANF or SNAP. And you can take that rate and use a multiplier to calculate your poverty, a 1.6 multiplier. For a while, the state was using that mechanism to count poverty, which does provide some differentiation. It's not, it provides some differentiation between schools. When you do that, many of our schools are at 100% because they actually would be above 100%, but at least you get some delineation between schools. They switched last year, they started to begin a switch to using the 84.9%. So it's a rolling average, and so last year it was 2 of 3 years that were using, 1 of 3 years that was 84.9%, 2 of 3 years. So this year, it's 3 of 3 years is 84.9%, which means that now all schools in the district have the same poverty rate. So a Sandtown Winchester's poverty rate is not the same as a Roland Park's poverty rate under the way it's counted. And the implications for the district is that we lose resources because a number of schools are, of course, above that 84.9%. And the higher funding for under the blueprint is for higher concentrations of poverty. So we have proposed changes to the state legislature. We have not secured those changes. We proposed a 1.6 multiplier. The state, the MSDE has done analysis using the American Community Survey Index, which is actually our preferred way to count it, which is a passive way to do an apples to apples way to count poverty. It uses a variety of indicators. It gives you a more nuanced picture. So we've also pushed for that. I know there was legislation in this legislative session. Delegate Smith, the chair of our delegation, did pass legislation that would tie that way of counting poverty to the Governor's Enough Act. So that office is now tasked with figuring out a way how to implement the American Community Surveys Index way of counting poverty. So we'll see if that turns into a way to count poverty, but we remain in a situation where we can't differentiate in terms of the way the poverty is counted between our schools.
For awareness, how, Allison, will that impact us this year?
So this year, again, we, well, so this year, what it means is that, I mean, on the one end, it's positive, and there is a positive part of it, which is that all of our schools are poverty. But it means that those schools who were above 84.9%, their poverty funding has gone down. So they've lost funding under that way of counting poverty. And again, it is on the higher, the way the formula works is it drives resources to higher need students. So it's the per pupil is higher for schools with higher poverty. So we lost a significant amount of money on that higher end of the spectrum of those schools.
So if I understand correctly, let's say, I don't know the statistics, but let's just say that we have a school that had 94% poverty based on the multiplier or the farms. And so since the state says, nope, you got 84.5% poverty, and we're just gonna apply that to every school, that means that that 10 or so percent in that particular school is not getting those additional dollars, correct?
That's correct.
And if we did the multiplier piece, that would not be applied to every school?
If we did the multiplier piece, it would take each school's direct certification rate, which is a lower rate. Direct certification is more akin to free lunch as opposed to free and reduced lunch, but then it would multiply it times 1.6%. So we have, when you do that, there's a significant number of schools who would be above that 84.9%, and they would see a significant increase in their funding.
I think that one of the challenges is, you know, I think, is the certification meaning that the families have to fill out actual forms and just declare their incomes. Is that correct?
The direct certification means that we already have data that we know that those families are on TANF or they're on SNAP. They're already on an income eligibility program, and so it doesn't require additional checks because they've already been certified to be eligible for an income eligibility program under the federal guidelines.
So that would be the indicator, is that there's somebody who's taking it. Also not as accurate as we would like, because there's families that are earning just above those, right? Yes. But not enough to be able to, you know, afford, you know, everything that they need. So we want to make sure that we're able to cover and give support for all of the families.
That's right. And again, that's not our preferred mechanism. Our preferred mechanism would actually be using the American Community Survey Index, which many hospitals use to compare poverty because it gives you multiple ways of looking at a neighborhood. So you could look at the addresses of the students who attend a school, and you could look at the poverty indicators for that census block, so number of vacant homes, median income, single-family household, various indicators, you could choose them, and then look at the relative poverty of that each individual student and come up with a combined rate, and that shows a much more delineation across the state. And so when MSCE did that analysis, you really could see the differences between Baltimore City students and the depth, the breadth of poverty in Baltimore City compared to the rest of the state, which does not come as clearly through a farms rate or a direct certification rate.
And so the legislation that Delegate Smith, Chair Smith put together ties that with the Enough Act, and they have to still figure it out, right? There still needs to be work, is what I'm saying, right? To try to figure this out.
Yeah, it's a report. They have to produce a report about how they would use that poverty mechanism to count poverty.
And then does that mean that there would be more money coming from the state, or is there a formula that comes to us anyway? So I'm just trying to figure out what does this then, is concentration of poverty only allowing for certain money within the school, or does that also say whenever we do the new calculation that we would be getting more money from the state or federal government for?
So it depends on how they would implement it, but they would have to take that mechanism of counting poverty and turn it into a formula. And so, you know, it would depend on whether, if they're trying to increase the amount of resources that are going to poverty, it depends on where they put the weights and the cutoffs in terms of, you know, it could increase resources for sure, but they could also set a limit that we're only going to spend $100 million more across the state on poverty, and then they would have to fit, the formula would have to fit the distribution of that relative poverty within that amount.
Okay, so there's still some work to be done there, but it sounds like it's moving in a direction that you're, okay, well, there's work to be done there.
There's a lot more work to be done. I would have stopped there, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. All right, so this is related to operations. Sorry. First question, let me make sure this is public. I do support City College moving to the University of Baltimore. Let me be frank. Let me say that again for the record. I do support City College going to the University of Baltimore. Perfect. But I also married a woman from Poly. But here's the thing. It is a great opportunity, but the significant public investment alone says there should be more than just a 3-year lease. Have we discussed within the board as well as staff about extending those 3 years? Because I know several schools like Emerson are being designed. In addition to that, we made a commitment that the voters will vote on this November to increase our CIP ask for you guys from 19 to 25 million, eventually to $50 million. So I think that this was a little bit short-sighted, is a constructive criticism. Sorry. So question is, have we thought about extending that lease? Because I agree with Commissioner Roberts, we should think about the entire portfolio and not just one school.
I'll start. Thank you, Councilman Torrance. I think it's important to also elevate, as we asked last week for the councilman, what the facility will, what happens to the facility once we use that facility.
Mr. Chair, if you're gonna
I think the conversation is certainly warranted, more strategy and long-term, like what our overall investment is in the space. But for the specific space, if you all could just illuminate for the council members tonight what that looks like, I think we do have an opportunity to continue discussing partnership with the university. But in this specific case, I think it's important to just illuminate the facility.
Yeah, and I'm going to ask Chief Dr. Washington to expound on the details of the space, but to the board chair's point, I think the larger context of what it means for a school to swing into a building, regardless of what that building is really important when we're talking about kind of long-term use of this space. So I'm going to turn it over to Chief Washington.
Before she answers, I just want to make sure the public understanding. I took classes in the building that you're going to occupy. I know the HVAC system that needs to be improved, the technology that needs to be improved, but I also am aware that I have schools who are cutting hall monitors, and this building will get 10 to 14 additional hall monitors, which at an average cost of between $40,000 and $50,000 is $500,000 a year. That to me is a large investment that is beyond just $9 million. I'm thinking that's bordering above $12 million once we do everything else. We don't know what's behind those walls. So I think that we need to have a conversation that this is more than just what would have been at Thurgood Marshall.
Sure, and I think we also have to have a discussion about different pots of money are assigned to different tasks. So the pot of money going to UB could not be used for any other purpose. So it's not as if we're taking money from a Carver or a Montebello. Well, Montebello's already built. We're not taking money from another school that could be used for this purpose. This is assigned money for this purpose, so I think that's also important context for the public to understand. And that's why when Chief Doherty went over at the very beginning, the different pots of money all come with restrictions and provisions. So within that context, Chief Washington, why don't you walk us through kind of what the current state of that space is at UB, please?
Okay. So the University of Baltimore's space is actually two different spaces. And the space where we're building out classrooms is actually a space that at some point University of Baltimore is going to be doing their own renovations. So there's two different considerations. The first one is that if we were to consider other schools in this space, we would have to increase the investment, because the reason why it's ideal for a city to go in the spaces because they don't have as many CTE spaces. So Poly would be a significant investment because we'd have to rebuild all of the CTE spaces. Even if Edmondson timeline is unknown because we don't have all the capital dollars for Edmondson, but Edmondson would be another place where we'd have to put double the amount because we'd have to rebuild all of the CTE spaces. So I will say that after city swings into the space, there are other plans for that space once city swings out of that space.
Councilman Torrance, what you're saying is not going on, as far as the safety, as you mentioned, like those monitors, and what the vice chair asked for is for a larger, more comprehensive safety plan that I know that we'll, work through to make sure that folks are updated on, and hopefully we can continue collaborating on that with multiple stakeholders.
Yeah, and I get you, but the appearance of it just looks bad in terms of significant public investment.
And
right?
how it is articulated to the public as well could have been more clear.
It could have been more clear. To be frank, the messaging that we got from staff was that this was cost neutral. But when I think about the additional security issues as well, that's added on to it. Granted, I have no dog in this fight, right? But I have to advocate for what my residents think, and especially my residents who are supporting Douglas High School and the pushback we received from the district for a school-based health center, right? I have to think in the context of where we're looking at our investments as a portfolio. And I say that because that's the next question, is about the school-based health center at Douglas and things I've learned recently from conversations back with state elected officials, as well as with persons that have been related to just doing school-based health centers. I just have a broader concern that, like, when we're doing the portfolio conversation, we shouldn't show up with a pro and con chart. We should get down to the nuts and bolts, but also talk about the staff costs too, because that number looks different when we add in the staff costs, and it can be upwards over $13 million. It doesn't matter, but it's the fact that there's a hidden cost that we didn't talk about publicly, right? About what does that look like? There are schools who don't, and I have two, that don't have working cameras, that we're installing cameras at another institution, right? I say that because when I have a school personnel telling me, I got robbed because we don't have a camera. A body was found across the street because we don't have a camera, but we're investing in a school. That to me, and I said this privately, but like some of the things in the comments were made about the young people have the opportunity to take college credit. That came across as classes to some of my residents, right? And I had to explain to them in the context of what it was said was not, but the context in which we had, and I say this as a person who had the opportunity to go to City and Poly. My grandmother raised me two things. Never go to a school that wouldn't originally accept you as a black person in Baltimore City, right? And that's a woman who graduated from Dunbar High School. The institutionalized racism that we have in our school choice process and how we have not genuinely attacked it in a way that is meaningful. It is not your work to do, but it's us as a community to reconcile ourselves. Okay. But we have to be thoughtful in how we communicate because that lens...
Colleagues, do we have any concerns with extending Mr. Torrance's time by a minute? Councilman, please continue.
Because that lens just totally undergirded the equity policy that the district created, right? That took credibility from having conversations with people at Douglas High School to discuss what's next for them, right? I've been lucky to inherit a district that has got a lot of 21st century school buildings. But there are some people who have not. And I think that and this is just me just suggesting that, I think we have to think about what that looks like for the portfolio. Those conversations were not as transparent as possible, even when giving updates from staff. And I'm just being transparent. The most transparent person at that table today was Dr. Washington, when she specified down to even giving us the designs of where the actual walls would come down, what was being built, right? People never saw that before. That was feedback that I got from my residents. And I'm just lifting up my black residents in West Baltimore who are asking that we have a consideration for the entire portfolio when making these decisions.
So I think one of the things that we absolutely need to do a better job with as a school district is remembering that communication needs to be ongoing. And that communication that we had a decade ago, 15 years ago around the needs and how buildings were selected was absolutely grounded in equity, and we had mass community support. We were one of the only urban school districts in the country that did not start in its wealthiest zip codes building new buildings. We actually went to zip codes that frankly have been historically under-resourced. But I also recognize that history gets lost. When a lot of the people that advocated for the first 21st century plan, their kids have graduated and they've moved on, and some of them are working in city schools. So I think one of the lessons is that communication needs to be ongoing. I think the other lesson is realizing that the way that schools and school projects, particularly in urban school centers that are not, for example, Montgomery County, who basically funds their school construction primarily from their local dollars. So frankly, they are not responsible to anybody for how they build or what they build. We are. And so what that means is that the money is not interchangeable. And what we need to do a better job at describing, particularly for your constituents and others who are 10 years out, is that frankly, every single school that has been built has had an allotment similar to that of City College. This is not extra money. This is not a special pot of money for City. This is frankly the cost for every single school, and that is equity. What is different in this case is that we had an alum, we had a community member, we had someone who is a son of Baltimore stand up and say, in this particular case, we have a way of providing a large high school that was going to be retrofitted in a middle school building, and anyone with early adolescents or adolescent children knows that the difference between being 12 years old and being 15 and the kind of facility that you need is very, very different. And so that alum, former mayor and now president of UB, Kurt Schmoke, stepped up, and I think the way that we heard Councilwoman Ramos saying earlier that we as a system need to be in a better position to partner. And so we partnered, and it was an opportunity. I think the equity frame that needs to be used is one that is consistent, one that acknowledges that we still absolutely have work to do, but is also transparent and patient with making sure that the full public in every neighborhood understands what the funding is, so that a lot of the questions, for example, around the Douglas Health Center, the Douglas Health Center is actually under the purview of Baltimore City Health Department. And we actually did, in response to a request, add that health center possibility to the plans based on the feedback we received. I think the question is, where is the money coming from? Where do we have flexibility? Where do we not have flexibility? Where do we as Baltimore City have to answer to an outside entity that frankly other jurisdictions don't? And one of the things that my father taught me very early on is he said, I've been poor and I've had money. And one of the biggest differences is that when you're poor, you have to follow other people's rules when they give you money. When you have the money, then you actually can make your rules. And so in this case, the money that is set aside to rehab swing space actually is consistent. The piece that is different is that an alum stepped up, and we had a decision to make. We presented it to the board voted. But the decision was not the equity decision that I think was frankly the result of the need for the ongoing communication that I referenced. The actual question was whether we were going to say no to a school that had an alum that stepped up, because we didn't have alum, including at Poly, who stepped up to do the same thing. And that is the question, does equity mean that everybody has to wear the same gray suit? Or does it mean that if somebody else steps up, we now have an example that we can use to leverage for other alum and other community members to step forward to do the same thing. So I take full responsibility for the fact that communicating 10 years ago we should have known does not necessarily translate, but I will say that the context and the understanding that we all have on how schools get funded, particularly in under-resourced urban communities, is radically different. And so the agency and the ability to shift funds is not the same here as it is, frankly, in a Howard County or a Montgomery County, and we also need that context.
I hear you, but I still have schools who don't have cameras. I still have schools who are cutting hall monitors, right? So I think, and I say this wholeheartedly, right? As an advocate who's been asking administration to figure out as we move forward to increase beyond what is our maintenance of effort to make sure that we can address these needs, I'm saying that we need to go back to the table and think about the other schools to make sure that I have a young person that can walk to school safely at Connections and that a camera's looking at them. Or we have young people who have a functional ID system at Carver, right? These are small things that we have not figured out. And to Dr. Washington's credit with her equity in terms of updating these systems, it is a lion's share. I know you have a $300+ million shortfall in terms of what we do through CIP. But I'm saying that my community members recognize that city deserves to be at UB, right? However, the increased hall monitors as well as cameras when people are asking for them is something that we have to look into and be transparent about. And listen, I love my experience at the University of Baltimore. I went there twice. But I think that for my young people to see that, like, I don't feel safe, and we have increased hall monitors, we're talking about almost $500,000 in expense for hall monitors, where other people are cutting their hall monitors, right? Give an example, a school that cut hall monitors, Mergenthaler, who desperately needs them in terms of their school climate. I'm just looking at it across the board from looking at your school-based actual allocations. I think we need
But that's a different pot of money, with all due respect, Councilman. It's a different pot of money.
I get it, but I think that, and this is my feedback to the district, think deeper. That's my transparent conversation with saying that, and I have to articulate on behalf of my residents that we have to think deeper. Even if we have to somehow figure out what pots of money we have on our side to help you, but there has to be thoughtfulness in terms of how we communicate that. Because saying $9 million is not the truthful cost of being at University of Baltimore.
That's where we have to start looking back at what that looks like. Thank you.
Cohen. Ramos.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just on this particular point, I think I definitely appreciate my colleagues' thinking around this. I certainly appreciate Vice Chair Roberts also. I think it's very important that we're looking, district-wide at safety. There was a commitment made that night that such a strategic plan for safety was going to be presented, and that the school system is working on it. And that was a major part of the discussion that evening. So I'm grateful that you heard that Dr. Santelises and the team heard that from the vice chair. I will say that the City College opportunity at UB is something that, first of all, retrofitting Thurgood Marshall and then putting it up for surplus would have been a complete waste of money. And so that wasn't going to work, right? The second piece on that is that the investment there will allow for other opportunities at UB for some of our other students, and challenge, frankly, every single institution of higher learning to do the same thing or something similar, because they should. And then lastly, I also represent poly parents. I don't represent poly, I represent poly parents. And I think if there is an opportunity for them, the school system would look for it as well. The last thing on the equity piece, in my district, it was very clear.
Colleagues, do we have any concerns with extending 30 seconds to Councilwoman Ramos's time? No concerns. Please continue.
Thank you. There was very clear that the residents and the school system wanted to make sure that schools, 21st century schools, were renovated first in neighborhoods that really needed it. Waverly, Coldstream, Homestead, Montebello, Darley Park, in my district. Those are just the examples in my district. So we did those first. Right, as a system, as a school, as my district, and as a district, and so it's now time for because cities waited for they don't have air conditioning. It's like the last school that doesn't have air conditioning. So anyway, I think it's very important. Yep, I'm going to wrap up. I'm just going to wrap up.
That's God's way of speaking to you.
Thank you. I just think that it's a really great opportunity for our school system and not just for City College. So thank you. Thank you very much. And those are my questions. I'm done.
Thank you. Torrance.
I thought Colin was here. Great. Douglas High School, School-Based Health Center. Here's my question. I know Rails had a single sole source procurement for their actual use of the facilities at KIPP and others. I think that I would like to see and understand that Rails relationship with KIPP as well as the school district to understand the current challenges at Douglas High School. In addition to that, I am asking not only the administration, but city schools I know that you guys said plans were being submitted to the state. I had not seen those plans added to the actual agenda. When will those plans be added to the agenda?
I don't know, but we can circle back to you.
That would be great. Can I have that by Friday?
I don't know. Chief Washington?
Sorry, can you repeat? Because I missed.
The second version of the design for the health center that you guys proposed to submit, I think.
We can get it to you by Friday, yes.
Perfect. The other question is, I would like a briefing to mainly discuss how we can build that partnership, because I'm sorry, Ms. Marguerite. Here's the thing. I live in a healthcare desert in West Baltimore, to the point where I advocated for a comprehensive senior health facility at Mondawmin. We're getting primary and specialty care at Mondawmin Mall to fill in that gap. We lost a pharmacy. We're getting a new pharmacy now, right? We now have Black-owned businesses that are going to be on that same property with a 24-hour daycare. We're meeting the needs of my residents, but my residents also said that there's a school building that's there that needs to have that health center. I just want to make sure that what the charge is, because while many of the people who can qualify for those services at Mondawmin may not qualify and may need, for our young people, access to stay in school, given the population that is serviced at Douglas High School. So as a commitment, I would like a meeting to discuss in detail the designs as well as how we can partner on ensuring that we can build this and fund it. I'm willing to go find some money to fund it, but I just want to make sure that for the public's purposes, the need is there on pages 54 and 55 of the comprehensive gap that we have in healthcare.
God speaking to you as well. Pretty soon we're going to run out of these. Grab the one from the budget director. He doesn't talk much.
And I just want to make sure that if we're all on the same page, the state does say that we do need a school-based health center and a comprehensive health center at Douglas High School. I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page about this as from city schools. Well, I say that because this is important in two phases. That design that I will get by the end of the week allows me to understand where and how you're going to design it. The other piece I want to talk about is the sole source that Rails got to be at KIPP and the discussion of it, because I remember those conversations in terms of the same issue, whether it be a lease or be a sole source. I think we need to have that conversation in depth. What I would like to request is all those procurement documents related to Rails going into KIPP, whether it be an MPIA request from our law department or yours, but I would like all of the documents related to that, whether it be the actual sole source document in addition to the contract that you have with city schools, in addition to the staffing plans, as well as how they were going through third-party billing, so we understand the totality of the revenue going into that site, but also related to that, the attendance data related to the number of young people who did not have to leave a school because they had a school-based health center as well.
Councilman, you're going to email that over?
Yes.
Outstanding, thank you. Very good.
I just want to say a little bit about the Rails. It predates Dr. Santelises and I as being in our roles, so I don't know the full history of it, but the original MOU was between Rails and KIPP and the health department. City Schools was not a party to the original MOU, so I don't know how that was drafted. I don't know the origins of it, but we can certainly look into it.
Cohen, gone. Ramos? Torrance?
Next question. I'll make this my last question because I know everyone wants to leave. I will preface this. I wholeheartedly agree that you should get another contract. I wholeheartedly agree that you should get another contract. But my concern is still with the assembly of your cabinet. I think with that, and I communicate this to the board, I think we need to do assessment of what does leadership look like in city schools in terms of persons who are not only live in the city of Baltimore, but also persons who have been school leaders, as well as their commitment to the city. I wholeheartedly think that this is something that we need to look into, because I'm gonna be transparent. I have a Black and brown boy and soon a little girl that will go to city schools. I see a cabinet that does not reflect that completely in terms of leadership positions that impact the day-to-day of the instruction as well as accountability. I'm happy Stacy is here in her position. But I believe that there is a missing of not only Latina, but Black excellence in certain cabinet positions, as well as director positions at city schools. I think we really need to have a wholehearted conversation about what does that look like. And let me be clear, I think you are Black excellence, Dr. S. However, I have to wake up and think about who is delivering instruction, who is helping those people process how this goes. I think that there's issues that are long beyond just class and color. I think that there's classism that we have to overcome in city schools as well, in terms of how we do our things at city schools. But I think that I would truthfully love to see an assessment of where we are in terms of talent at the director levels, the coordinator levels, as well as the chief levels, so that we can make sure that we may have a cabinet that may not reflect our young people completely, but also we have directors and everyone else who does and understands culturally the delivery of our education in Baltimore City Public Schools. I will start by saying that the board hires the CEO of city schools, and as the board makes that determination, we trust that the CEO hires the staff to implement the board's vision, the board's goals, as the board has collaboratively developed with multiple stakeholders. And so, I'm not sure if there was a question from that, Councilman Torrance. Dr. Dabrowski, Dr. Telsay.
Mine works.
I think that we need to actually have that conversation about what does our staff reflect. And I say that from top down because even in city government, I struggle with our agencies not having people who have residency because you have to experience what our young people do. One of the things I've charged administration as others to find ways that we can make sure that staff at city schools can get support towards down payment assistance to live in Baltimore City, because I believe that we experience our lives for our young people the same way as they do, we will have a better understanding about how to deliver service. So I just want to make sure that we look at what the composition looks like so that we can have that honest discussion publicly, because I've heard board members say this about the cabinet, but I want to take it a little level deeper about actually those who are delivering on the front lines, because you may have your vision of equity, but not everyone shares it. Not everyone can recognize their own classism. Not everyone can recognize their sexism or their blindness or unconscious bias. So I just want to say that, and I'll leave you with that.
Sure, no, and I appreciate that. I will say this, that I probably have led organizations for at least the last 25 years or so. And one of the things that I have found is that if we are only looking to count faces, backgrounds, zip codes where people come from, it's actually an entry level for me, and I'm only speaking for me, Councilman Torrance, just so that the public is very aware of kind of my view on this. And what I have found is that the surface indicators of whether someone actually understands equity often cloud what happens on a day-to-day basis. And that there are a number of people who have taught me, in this city included, that just because you grew up in a zip code, just because you are a particular gender, or just because you are from a particular ethnic group does not mean that you put children first. It often means that sometimes you're operating under your own deficit understanding of what an enriched education looks like. It also does not mean, which this city has taught me, that leaders of color actually support other leaders of color in moving up. And so when I look at people like Dr. Dabrowski, I see frankly, for the first time in the last 25 years in city schools, a Black head of teaching and learning. I see someone who is actually developing people who can take the reins afterwards. And so what I have learned, and maybe it's because I'm 56 years old, is that if I'm only looking at the surface of who people are to check boxes, then I am not as effective in actually producing and growing an equitable system. Does that mean within interpersonal relationships that we all have to learn how to communicate? We all have to learn how to appreciate where we're coming from. What Dr. Tracy Durant, who is one of the most sought after leaders of equity nationally, let alone in the state of Maryland, that I have learned is that more than one thing can be true. And that just because, right, someone fits a particular check box does not mean that their actions show that. And so the leadership team that I am building, and I want to appreciate the board chair and the full board. I think Commissioner Muhammad is still there and Commissioner Lawson. What I want to appreciate is that the way they know that I lead and that I have been allowed to lead is getting the best people, regardless of what their background is, to be able to lead for children. And at the same time, I hold heavy goals for how we are developing a diverse pipeline that is representative of the best of Baltimore. So when Councilwoman Ramos says we need more Latina leaders, that is absolutely the case. And it is something that Chief Nielsen and I have discussed. And so we can name it publicly, but I also want everyone to know I'm not operating on a leadership quota system. That's not how I do my work. I do my work based on who can lead from their seat, who has demonstrated outcomes for young people, and because when I don't lead that way, I end up being disappointed that people who look like me don't always lead for the children that look like me. So again, I'm old, fully admit that. I am proudly 56 years old, and I will say it. But I have lived long enough to know that equity is in what you do every day and how you treat people. And so I'm not gonna lead, and maybe that should be a public discussion about who you want for your CEO, because this CEO ain't leading with a quota. I'm leading with what you do for young people, how you lead, and how you develop. And that's just who I am. And I think we have moved great distance using that, and at the same time that we in city schools, frankly, ahead of the city, began the work internally for our own individual reconciliation of bias. But I don't major in click phrases or words. I want people who can be on the ground and model what leadership means and do it for kids. And that's just who I am. And some of that's because I'm old, because I've been there, done that. I've been there, done that with everybody's got to look this way, everybody's got to come from this zip code, and then stuff falls because people aren't prepared well, or you thought somebody that looked a particular way needed to be there, and then everybody's calling me, and my phone is blowing up because something blew up. But I'm proud of the fact that we have paraprofessionals under a white woman's leadership working with BTU to make sure that more Native Black women to Baltimore, many of whom did not go to college, are now on track to be teachers. And I am proud of that. And that if you want to look, feel free to audit, feel free to do whatever you want to do. I am proud of the fact that we are building in those supports, and it's not going to all fall in some perfect little bubble. So yes, Councilwoman Ramos, I was glad you surfaced it tonight, because my team knows I've surfaced it, because I've looked at that 20% in climbing and said, this is an area that we need to build out. And some of our best teachers are the best candidates for those leadership positions. So I just have to say that to go on public record so that the whole city knows that's how I lead. And that's why we've made the gains. We will continue to invest in people, but I don't do quotas.
I just want to be frank. I'm not talking about quotas. I'm talking about looking at how people are leading from their seats. I'm proud of the work that John has done, because I've seen more Black directors get promoted in the job, right? I'm acknowledging the growth of the district, but I'm also recognizing that there's more work to be done. And I hear you. I don't believe in quotas, right? I'll be frank, right? I am a firm supporter in diversity of thought, diversity of age, diversity of just being a person that understands what our young people go through. That's why I mentioned classism, because I can remember times where I looked at data and it was black people suspending black girls more than anyone else, right? I think that when we think about this, I'm just asking that the district take a deeper dive to see how people are leading from their seat, regardless of race, but also recognize that some of our young people are seeing service providers that don't look like them, right? Psychologists, right? So I'm questioning this because that's what I'm talking about, the deeper version. I'm happy for paraprofessionals who are getting this opportunity, but I think also the district has left them behind in terms of how much they make, right? I can tell you that I have people who can barely afford to live as a hourly paraprofessional. I've recognized the strides you made in terms of the union contract. I think the district has come light years away from where you saw it at, right, under Dr. Thornton. But I think, and I want to say this as a theme of tonight, was to push even more, because I believe that you have a vision, but there has to be the low-hanging fruit that still matters from your seat. I think there has to be accountability for things that impact our young people every day. That's why I hark on school police, right? Because things were said were not accurate, right? That health center in West Baltimore is important because there are young people who don't have access to that health care. There's a reason why we're moving the women's health clinic from North Avenue deeper into my district to provide black women with free mammograms and pap smear, because that is a health disparity that we have to address. What I'm challenging you is to look at all those seats and think deeper. Not to create a quota, but think deeper, because as a black man who came from Latrobe Homes, who people thought would never make it out, who saw his own cousin die, leaving out of that project housing, walking to the University of Baltimore from 929 Abbott Court to get my master's in my law degree, I firmly believe I am not an exception. And I'm asking you all to go deeper, because our young people deserve to see that there is a standard that black men, especially black teachers, black men, because we know the outcomes of black men being in the actual classroom. I'm asking to challenge you to go deeper. I recognize Chief Nielsen's work. Actually, I appreciate the fact that she personally signed off on people's actual debt forgiveness, right? That to me showed me what her heart was, right? What I'm asking is that we think deeper, push deeper, and ask those questions, because in the next couple of months, I'm gonna be submitting a resolution that asks about your suspension data, thinking about who is, by race coding as well as salaries, suspending young people more than anyone else. Because we need to have that conversation about classism. We need to have that conversation on why young people, especially black women, are being suspended at a higher rate still on your data for disruption, because they simply just talk back, not asking why she was hurt or why what happened the night before. I think that my challenge to you is to think deeper, and I'll leave that with you tonight.
Colleagues, any other questions? Seeing that there are none, Dr. Santelises, I want to thank you for all of your hard work. I want to especially thank Allison Perkins Cohen, long day, Allison Perkins Cohen and Melissa Broom for always being responsive. I actually do have one question, serious question that's very quick. We heard from the Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Safety Engagement, I think it was yesterday or the day before, about the school-based community violence intervention program. And I understand that they're aiming to have that set up and rolling at Digital Harbor at the beginning of the school year, end of August, beginning of September, and that they're working on some type of MOU with city schools. You already asked this. I missed that. Can you quickly repeat the answer for me, or whomever's in charge of that?
I'll ask the Chief of Staff since she answered it.
Thanks, Allison.
Thank you. Yes, we drafted the MOU and have sent it over to Monzi a while ago. So I don't exactly know how long ago, but Monzi is it's with Monzi for review. So we're waiting for their comments back.
How long ago was that? plus or minus week, month?
Let me see if I can get a text quickly. We can get back to you. I don't know.
Is your reasonable expectation that that program will be up and operating at Digital on the first day of school?
Yes, that is our expectation. I know that this is what they're working on. Several weeks is what I'm told.
Let me phrase that question differently.
Oh, I'm sorry. Several weeks ago is when the MOU was sent over. Sorry.
Got it.
Yeah.
Let me phrase my question differently. Do you believe that program will be up and running on the first day of school at Digital Harbor the way it's been designed?
As far as I know, I have to say that I'm not as close to it as some people are, but I think that I think Monzi has been working on it. I think that, again, I know less about the partnership at Digital Harbor. I wonder if Sonia Goodwin could speak to this more than I. That would be better. Thank you, Sonia.
Just passing microphones at this point.
Working. Okay, there it is. Hello. Yes, so actually currently we have been working very closely with Digital, and Digital did get a chance to select their CBO, their community-based organization who they're working with. And we have been in contact with Monsi, and so we actually had a meeting about 2 weeks ago where Monsi and ourselves, we were talking with the school and the community-based organization just so that we can see some of the needs of the school to make sure what's in the MOU is something that's reflective of the needs of the school. We also just had an event, and Digital was a part of it, along with our community-based organization, where we actually listened to the students. We asked the students what they wanted. We asked the students what did they need. And from that, we were able to award them with, we gave them a financial award so that they can create a community, a student-led project, which we're waiting to hear back from them. And it was them and two of our other schools that were a part of it. So we are definitely on track. We did not want, I'm not sure if I should say this, but we did not want the paperwork to hold up the needs of the students. The students wanted to see us, the students wanted to hear from us. So we made sure that we were there as Baltimore City Public Schools, not in separation of the mayor's office. They have been along with us, but we do know with certain things that we can't do, certain data that we can't share until the MOU is in place, but that did not stop Baltimore City Public Schools from supporting them.
That's wonderful. That's great to hear. You indicated that Digital Harbor High School selected the CBO that they'll be working with?
Yes, they are.
The movement team?
Yes, it is the movement team.
My understanding from the conversation last evening, perhaps I'm confused, was that Monty would be, but I'm totally indifferent to that. So that decision has been made and has been communicated to Monty?
Yes, we were actually in the same room 2 weeks ago at Digital. So this is not something that is on paper yet, but Baltimore City Public Schools, as a partner with the CBO, we made sure that we address some of the needs. But this is not a part of the MOU. This is in addition to, because we did not want to have the students waiting for services.
Got it, but Digital Harbor administration at DHHS has selected TMT as the CBO for the CVI pilot program in September, correct?
Mavis Jackson, the principal of Digital Harbor, was there with us, and she actually requested to have the movement team as her CBO for next year.
But thank you, that's helpful. So that decision has been made?
It has been made for this current year. So because we're not in contract with them yet, yes.
Yep. No, I appreciate everything. The decision, phrase it differently. The decision has been made that TMT will be the CBO for this upcoming school year. Is that statement correct?
I can say for this current current school year, they have been working with them as the CBO. And the school would like for them to be the CBO for next school year, but it is not a contract for next school year as of yet.
Right, okay, so high school administration has stated that they would like TMT to be the CBO, but that decision has not yet been made for the upcoming school year.
We are only working with this current school year. So the decision is still going to have to go on paper for next school year, but the school has made it very clear to Baltimore City Public Schools and to Monty that is who they would like to continue as their CBO because of relationships that have been built.
Got it. Mr. Merrill, can you please get me and Nancy from my office on an email with your name again? I'm sorry, ma'am.
Sonia Goodwin, the Executive Director of Whole Child Services and Supports.
Ms. Goodwin, who's fantastic, as well as someone from Monty, so we can get clarification. Thank you so much, Mr.
So
Merrill.
Stephanie has been the one who I've been in direct contact with.
Director Mavronis would
Stephanie
be
and
just
Kristen.
fine, or whoever the mayor's office deems appropriate to loop in on that. Thank you so much, ma'am.
And if I could just add, it has been a great partnership. And as I said, with the students sharing with us the needs that they have and their wants and how they want their voices heard, that is exactly how we have been operating.
Outstanding. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Director or Chief Goodwin? Chief Goodwin? Ms. Goodwin?
Executive Director.
Executive Director Goodwin. Thank you. C.A. Leach.
Yes, so I just want to be clear, because we had this conversation last night. I'm not sure that there is a difference in what was communicated tonight versus what we communicated last night from Monty. So if you can clarify the request about what you want clarity on.
Well, I think Executive Director Goodwin cleared that up, but I think I'd like to just be looped in with city schools with Monty, so I can kind of double check what both groups are saying to make sure the thing's on track for the beginning of the school year. Because
Okay.
as I expressed last evening, I have significant concerns about whether or not this will be in place on the first day of school. So that's, I
Got
would
it.
just like to monitor progress, and I think it would be helpful to have someone from city schools there, considering that Monty is working out the MOU with city schools.
Got it. So we are happy to follow up, but I just want to be clear that what city schools communicated tonight is the same thing that we communicated, is that we plan on working towards the first day of school, having this program operational. We committed to getting you the program design, which I will double back with the team to make sure that we got that over to you. What we will do is we will follow up, work with you to convene a meeting so that you can get additional clarity, but I think it was clearly communicated by both parties that we are working together and moving towards the first day of school.
I think it was clearly communicated by both parties that we were working together for the first day of school. I will take responsibility for not asking the question, but at the beginning when I asked the question, it was very unclear, and I looked at Mr. Merrill and he nodded his head up and down, indicating that he understood why I was unclear. But now that I had a chance to talk with Executive Director Goodwin at length about it, I think that it's clear to me that we're all on the same page. Again, I will take responsibility for not having asked the question more clearly at the beginning. So I think we're in a good place and can move forward, and would definitely appreciate being looped in with both Monty and city schools.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, I want to just make sure that the other four schools, because I had asked the question earlier, because Mervo is also in this program, that the council members in the other four schools are also in coordinated meetings. I'm having a lot of meetings at Mervo, so I understand a little bit more what's going on, but I want to make sure that all of those communications are happening with all four schools and the council members with each of the schools.
I will, that would be, just to be clear, that's a separate request from.
I understand.
Yep,
Yep.
no, I got it. All right. Councilwoman Ramos, duly noted. Any other questions, colleagues? Seeing that there are none, Dr. Santelises, again, thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, thank you for being here. This resolution of the Mayor and City Council of Baltimore is in recess until such a time that we take a vote. We will be reconvening for the regular ordinance of estimates tomorrow at 9 a.m. Thank you. We're now in recess.